we can be like the other YMCA's on Long Island with their masking policies. Currently, the general YMCA policy is if you're vaccinated, then masks are optional. If you are unvaccinated, then masks are recommended. I understand that we are a town, and the building is a town and village-owned building structure, and I understand how that plays in. I'm just wondering if we can adjust the policy. We're given the mandate in August, and yeah, so I'm just wondering if we can change the policy at all.
So, Susie, so you're asking that the policy be changed in what way? I'm sorry, to mandate masks for use indoors?
No, currently the masks are mandated for the building, consistent with other town and village-owned buildings. We are a different kind of facility, and I would request to be consistent with the other YMCA-run facilities on Long Island, which is for those who are vaccinated, masks are optional. For those who are not vaccinated, masks are recommended.
Right. Okay. We certainly can take that question up. It is a town-owned building. We do have an agreement, a license agreement with the YMCA. I think I'd want to confer with council about what authority we might have over the operations of that separate entity, and we can get back to you.
Yeah, Peter, if I may, I've had this discussion with John, when we did change the policy, and John, I don't know if you want to chime in here, but he was saying because it is a town-owned building, they should be following the town's mask guidelines. And that's what when we put out our press release, the folks at Long Island, Ann Brigus, the president, and Eileen Nauer, the COO, is copied on all that correspondence. And as soon as they received our press release and our flyer, they posted it at the Y. So that's the way we've been going forward, since COVID struck. But John, I don't know if you want to chime in here.
Well, really, there's some reason to deal with this building differently from other town buildings. This is the policy that the board's enacted for the entire town, for all town facilities. So, I'm not sure what the distinction would be for this building.
If I may, the distinction is that we are an exercise and wellness facility, which is a different use than the other town village buildings.
Well, we have a variety of uses in town buildings. We have a senior center, we have, highway, but the policy's been the same for all town buildings. It'd be up to the board if they had, some justification for changing it for this building.
Well,
we'll take your comments under consideration, Susie, as a board and discuss that.
Okay.
And by the way,
thank you so much.
Yeah, and by the way, Susie, I want to thank you because I know you volunteered alongside of us in the vaccination center at the former CDCH building. You were there at, I think, every single vaccination clinic. I saw you there and worked with you, and I really appreciate your volunteering for our community.
It's my pleasure.
Take care.
All right, thank you.
Bye-bye. Jason, do we have any other callers on the line?
Yes, we do. Let's see. Unmuting now. Hello, 2975. You're on the air.
Hello. My name is Theo Landy. I own the Party Shop in East Hampton. This is my 32nd year. And I'd like to talk about the ban on balloons. I know earlier in the year that you said that you didn't really feel that it affected anybody. Well, I have to say that it really affects my business. If this goes through, I will be out of business 32 years. I've been through recessions and depressions and COVID and everything else, but a ban on balloon does it. I really think education goes a long way. You taught people how to clean up after their dogs. I think people can be taught about how to dispose of their balloons properly. We have every card on every order that is delivered. On the back, it says to respect the earth and how to dispose of balloons. We have signs in the store. We have people sign a paper that tells them how to dispose of balloons. So I feel that we do act responsibly. And I do think the town could really think of maybe educating people before they just take color out of people's lives. People enjoy balloons. I mean, I think something else should be done. I went the other day, the ban on plastic straws. I went to McDonald's the other day. Yeah, there was a paper straw and a big plastic cup filled with soda. To me, that's really a ridiculous ban. If you're going to ban something, ban the water bottles, ban the plastic cups, don't start with a little straw. And I really think education is the thing in the case of balloons.
Thank you for calling, Ms. Landy. We appreciate your comments. And, as a business owner, we certainly want to hear from you about the potential impacts of any proposed legislation.
But what do you think about the idea? Don't you think education first would be the answer?
Well, I think, we've been educating people for years about, balloons and other such things. You mentioned straws. One of the reasons why straws were sought to be banned, plastic straws, is because they ended up being a very large percentage of the debris that washes up on beaches. And when they did beach cleanups and they counted and categorized the different types of, garbage that comes up, that was pretty high on the list of what washes ashore. Balloons, anybody who walks the beaches will find the withered balloons and attached ribbons, which we have plenty of documentation of entangling birds and other sea life. Our sea turtles eat jellyfish. It's one of their main sources of food. They often confuse balloons with jellyfish, ingest them, and die as a result. And while I understand that, this is a really a national, maybe even a global problem, it's something that we feel that we can address here locally. And there are a number of options that people could use as an alternative to celebrate occasions. And I think looking at those alternatives to transition to is important as well.
Well, what options do you think makes up for the colorful balloons that you bring to people? What options? I mean, yes, we sell streamers and we sell decorations and we do all these things. But there is nothing like a bunch of balloons coming to someone to say happy birthday or get well or you were married or, I mean, really. It's like you're taking all the pleasure. I feel sorry for the turtles. I feel sorry for the fish. I love wildlife. But it was like the overkill with the piping plovers. They would have moved. We did not have to do away with our 4th of July celebration. They would have re-nested someplace else. There is scientific study to show that. I mean, we do a little bit of overkill in this town. And you have to admit that I'm like the only mom and pop store that's affordable left in this town. And it's been hard enough. Business is not great, as you know. And you're just like putting me out of business without thinking of other things that could be done.
Miss Landy, you're the party shop in East Hampton. Miss Landy, are you the party shop in East Hampton Village?
Yes.
So,
Yes,
Miss Landy,
I am.
I understand. I'm listening to your concerns. I just want to make sure you knew that The potential draft
Yes,
legislation.
I know, you're the town. I understand that. But
It would only
starts
affect
at
the town
and if
businesses.
the town does it, then the village is going to do it. So
I understand
really
that. I
think
just want to
maybe
make
a
sure you
little
do that.
more thought. Yes,
Okay,
I
well,
understand that.
Okay, thank you.
We do
Thank
appreciate
you
you
very
taking the
much
time.
for listening.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And you take care. Be well.
Bye.
Bye-bye. Jason, could we go to the next caller, please?
Unmuting now. Hello, caller 8764. Oh, hey, David.
Hi, good morning. This is Dave Buddha. I wanted to just spread the word a little bit. It was a beautiful weekend, and my wife and I and dogs took a nice walk on the Buckskill Meadow Trunzo Preserve. The pass of about a half a mile, I believe, has been cleared, although the tree stumps are still laying there, and the multi-use path has not yet been created, so it's in a very natural state. It's a lovely place to take a walk, and I'd like to encourage people to take advantage of it, but you need some signage at the entrance so people can find it. And then I had one thought. Since the central area of that preserve, total gross area is 25 acres, but if you exclude the area on the other side of the tracks, it's significantly less. But the central area is already cleared, and the thought dawned on me that if I had a small dog and I was looking to have a small dog park, that would be a lovely place to do it without needing to remove any existing vegetation. So the small dog park idea, which was broached with respect to the existing Springs Park, if it were to go outside the existing limits of the Springs Park, it would necessitate the removal of about an acre of substantial vegetation, whereas creating a small dog park at the Buckskill Meadow Trunzo Preserve would not. So I would like to leave that idea with you. Second topic. In the last couple of weeks, I've watched the planning board meeting, and just this week watched the Springs School Board meeting on LTV. And I noticed that both of them had their members there present, at least those that wanted to or could appear, and some members of the public or participants were there live. I really think that the town's current posture, prohibiting any live meetings and only doing it virtually, is a disservice to the public, and frankly, factually, is no longer necessary or appropriate. I think that the town does many things that unfortunately are a little more than virtue signaling, and at this point, it's time to reassess your position. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, David. And, we're going to continue to monitor the infection rates within the township, and the results, which I was going to report later in my liaison report, showed that in the period from 9/20 through 9/26, the percent positive of tests given in East Hampton declined somewhat from 12% to 9%, but 9% is still quite high. The Montauk levels in the same time period went from the previous period of 14% to 11%. So I'm hoping that this downward trend continues. I agree it would be great to get back to in-public meetings. I will note also that a number of other municipalities have gone to and are maintaining remote meetings, including our sister town next door. And I believe all of our local CAC meetings, the CACs have continued to meet remotely. They feel that by the vote of those committees, they felt that was necessary still. So, we're going to continue to monitor that. I hope to get back to in-person meetings soon, but that will be based on declining positivity rates.
Thank you.
Could we go to the next caller, Jason?
That is our last caller.
Okay. Well, I guess we can move on with our topics then. We have Jeannie Carrozza with us today. Jason, do we have Jeannie?
Yes, yes, we do. I'm letting her into the room right now.
Thank you so much.
Good morning.
Good morning, Jeannie. How are you?
Good. Let me get my face on there. There you go. All right. Good. Thank you. All right. Our first bid to accept is the compliance work at the East Hampton Airport Fuel Farm, and that will be an annual contract. And the low apparent bidder for that is Aventura Construction Corp. Next is the printing of miscellaneous forms, and that's Montauk Printing and Effects of Color. Also, we're going to extend the agreement for the professional auditing and accounting services for the town, and that's with Naraki Smith LLP. And then we'll be noticing we have a couple of redos. One is the re-proposal for the Georgica Pond at Route 27 rest stop stormwater abatement. And then we're going to try again for the purchase and deliver jet skis. And we're putting it out there that just to make sure we have it for our spring season or summer season. So if it's hard to get to, hopefully, can wait a bit on that one. And lastly, we're going to have the printing of sanitation permits and a few other forms. And that's all I have for today.
Questions for Jeannie?
No.
Jeannie, I have a quick question. I know that
Sure.
we had put out bids for Springs Library roof and chimney repairs, and
Right.
We had rejected the bids, and I know that we were going out for a rebid on that. Can you tell me where we are on getting that out?
Sure. Dennis from the East Hampton Library reached out to me actually just yesterday, and I checked with LK McLean. They're the engineers on that, and we're scheduled to have that notice on October 14th.
Okay, thank you so much.
Okay.
Appreciate that. Have a great day, Jeannie.
Thank you. You too. Bye-bye.
That brings us up to our next topic, and a quite important one, in my opinion. That is a discussion of the tentative budget for 2022. This is the fourth budget that I've submitted under the tax cap in the last 4 years, and one that the board has consistently supported, which has gotten us to where we are with a AAA bond rating, continuing even through the pandemic. There are a lot of challenges that we've faced in the last 18 months, strains on our community, strains on the budgets, and we've seen the demographics of our town change significantly during this period of time. Housing affordability, which was at a crisis level before the pandemic, has now really exponentially increased. The amount of commuter traffic into the area has increased, and all of these pressures have made it more and more difficult for the town to hire and retain staff. This is not just a town municipal problem, but it extends into all aspects of our community life, whether it would be the school district's ability to hire and retain staff, as well as the ability of private enterprise businesses within the township. We have recently negotiated a contract with our CSEA and our Police Benevolent Association for those labor contracts going forward. We think, at the time they were rather conservative, and we, I think, put forward and got support for those agreements. But we see the landscape changing, and with an increase in the number of people who are living out here year-round, that creates a greater demand for services across the community, whether it be sanitation, highway maintenance of our roads, given the additional traffic that we're seeing, additional services across the board. And it's becoming more and more difficult to present budgets and keep them below the 2% tax cap mandated by New York State. breaking the cap requires the town board majority to decide to do so and to vote for increases to be able to meet those demands. So I'm presenting an initial budget that is below the tax cap. I would suggest that we can't maintain this status quo of staying below the tax cap indefinitely without finding some other source of non-tax revenue or finding some other, way forward. I think ultimately we will need to look at piercing the tax cap in order to be able to provide competitive wages for town employees and to provide the volume of services to the community, whether it's garbage pickup from municipal cans in the downtown areas, whether it's policing, code enforcement, you name it, buildings and grounds. Again, we've benefited for many, many years from having a large tax base that only required services for 2 or 3 months of the year, and the year-round local population was much lower. The trend is that many more people will be living here year-round. And again, we're going to have to look very hard at being able to provide the necessary services in order to maintain our quality of life. So one of the constant issues that we struggle with in presenting a budget under the 2% tax cap is that the cost of everything goes up. More than 2% in many cases. The CPI for the past year was over 5.4%, I believe. And, we've had contractual and mandatory obligations that the town faces, ranging from increases in the retirement system. This year, I believe it was over $700,000. So with all that being said and kept in mind, our goal is to stay below the 2% tax cap, but we know we're at a critical juncture in terms of being able to maintain our quality of life and provide the services that the community is going to demand. So with all that being said, I'm going to turn it over to Rebecca Hanson, who's our budget director. Thanks so much for all of your hard work, working with me and the department heads to develop this budget. And there are some creative approaches I think we can take to meet some of those wage increases that are warranted and hopefully still stay below the tax cap. But this is the opening salvo in that discussion with the rest of the board. So thank you, Becky.
Thank you, Supervisor, and the town board, and happy to be here today to present my first budget to the town board. And I just really want to thank everyone, including the department heads and my support staff, for all of their help and their cooperation along the way. I especially want to mention a thank you to Meiji Valera and Richard Buckskin of my office, who stayed well past midnight one night last week, making sure that that budget document got collated and delivered on time to the town clerk's office. So they really went above and beyond, and I really appreciate their support and their loyalty in getting the job done. So just to run through some of the general numbers that the supervisor has brought up in this tentative document. The total spending right now is just over $85 million, and this is an increase of $2.6 million from the adopted 2021 budget. Again, as the supervisor said, this document does stay under the tax cap by $5,068. The room that we had this year for the tax cap increase was about $1.9 million, which is actually about the same as the current fiscal year budget that you're in. Unfortunately, as of right now, even though the town won't receive its actual retirement bill until next month, there are no exemptions under the tax cap. I know during this fiscal year, the town was able to get a bit of an exemption with the increases in the retirement costs, but as of right now, there are no planned exemptions for the any of the retirement system costs. So while we try to avoid huge increases in the retirement system costs, the one silver lining to that is that we do like to realize some savings, with the cap, with some of the exemptions, but as of right now this year, there aren't any. We did take a really hard look at non-tax revenues and did try to take a conservative approach in many of them. As you can imagine, the town's still rebounding from COVID in some aspects, And while there were certain revenues that we ended 2020 with a large surplus, like the mortgage reporting tax, as you know, that those are revenues that we can't always rely on from one year to the next. We believe we are starting to see a decrease because last month's CPF money was half of the amount in the prior month. So we don't know if we're starting to see a little bit of that decrease. We also take that conservative approach when we're looking at revenues as, say, with the building department. They are on par to exceed revenue expectations for this year. But again, being a very market-driven type of revenue source, again, we take a conservative approach when looking to increase some of those revenues. We did increase it a little bit, the mortgage reporting tax. We feel comfortable. We increased it at $150,000 going into 2022. We did increase some of the parking lot revenues at the beaches because we saw even with COVID, an examination of prior years that there was some room that we would be able to budget some increases. There also are some increases in the leases that the town has in the various funds, the A fund, the B fund, and the airport fund. So a lot of those tenants do have annual increases. So of course, those are built in as part of our revenue source. The town was pleased that the county did reinstate its police revenue share. I know in the last year when they were planning this budget, they were anticipating a decrease of funding and revenue of $500,000. The county did make whole for this year for 2021, and they have assured us that moving forward, including 2022, that the funds will be fully restored. So those amounts were fully restored, for the town on the revenue side of the budget. The town is continuing its policy, and again, to use the C word again, taking a conservative approach in using any surplus and reserves. Of the total surplus that the town has, about 3% of that right now is currently allocated in this budget. As you all know, we are routinely told that reoccurring revenues should pay for reoccurring expenditures, and that tapping into surplus funds is not necessarily a best or recommended financial practice in paying for reoccurring expenditures and annual expenditures. So what do all these numbers mean for everybody? So when we get right down to it, people want to know how this impacts their tax rate. So there are slight increases for both those living inside and outside of the villages. Those living outside the villages will see a tax rate increase of just over 2.6%, and those living inside the villages will see an increase of just over 4.4%. So if we are looking at, the assessed value of a property of $100, that is about 53 cents inside the village and 87 outside the village per $100. So when you look at the chart within the budget document for someone who has a home with an assessed market value of $1.2 million, someone outside of the village will see an increase of just over $60, and inside the village will be just over $37. So again, these increases are on par with prior years. And, we were pleased that we tried to keep those rate increases to a minimum. There are some spending highlights in the budget that are probably worth mentioning. There are some increased monies for some of the local organizations and LTV that the town works closely with that provide really important and critical services for a number of town residents, and especially LTV, who was all through last year during COVID and even now still providing the virtual meetings for municipalities such as ourselves and the school districts. The supervisor also mentioned there are actions in here relating to town personnel in the workforce, with the settled contracts between the CSEA and the two police unions, but also that there are a number of regrades and merit pay increases to recognize the work by so many of the employees that we have here at the town that have performed extraordinary service over the past year. So just to backtrack a little bit, when I talked about the $2.6 million increase overall in spending, half of that directly, $1.3 million, can be attributed to increases in salaries and benefits. $800,000 of that $1.3 million is just for salary increases alone, and that includes contractual increases. That includes any merits or promotions that the town board is considering as part of this document. Again, we have projected that the retirement rates will be increased, but again, we won't get our final bill until next month. The good news with that is, the comptroller has said publicly that we anticipate that those retirement rates will be going down in the next fiscal year. Some of the other increases that we have looked at is there will be a band payment as part of the annual debt sale that happened this year. So there's an increase for a band payment of just over $70,000. And there's a slight increase in auditing services that we had to provide for this year due to the additional reporting requirements that the town will have to do. So those are some of the highlights. If anyone has any questions or concerns or issues, obviously more than happy to address any concern you have.
Any questions from board members or comments?
Well, I just wanted to say, building on what you had opened with, Peter, that, we need to make our salaries, more competitive to other municipalities and to the private sector. I'm not sure that we're going to be able to fix that with this budget, but I think that it's something that we need to plan for. And maybe we could talk about putting together, a committee to study how to increase non-tax revenue, taking a look at all of our fees to make sure that we're competitive. We did that with the fire marshal's office a few months back, and so that we can plan for this. And then I look forward to having the conversation about the American Rescue Plan funds, because as I saw in your budget statement, we're getting a little over $2 million there. And is there a way, if we, take a real deep dive into this, to offset some of the expenses we have in the current budget with American Rescue Plan funds, so that we can start to, increase funding for those departments you mentioned, like police and code enforcement and, buildings and grounds and parks and recreation, because I'm sure all of us are hearing it at our spring CACs, at our CACs, mine is the spring CAC. The concern community members have about maintaining the quality of life that we've always enjoyed here, about, litter comes up, I think, across the board in all of our conversations that we're having with the community. Speeding is another thing that comes up. Folks that are having, Airbnbs are being run in people's homes next door, and, code enforcement is trying to address that. So, I would hope that, we could further this conversation, and I would, love to be on a committee that, studied this and saw ways to make recommendations so that we can close any gaps that we have and be able to, pay our town staff competitively, because, we all know how expensive it is to live here.
Those are all great points, Kathy. And, with regard to the ARPA funds, Becky and I have been talking about ways to offset some of the expenses in the budget. And I think by the next meeting we have next Tuesday, we'll have some things to present to be able to increase, to shift some money around to be able to increase and meet some of those regrades that are really so crucial for us to just maintain our competitive stance within the economy here, local economy, and attract people and retain people who are already here. Just to give you an idea, we've been looking across the board at regrades for clerical staff, for highway workers, and all the rest, and trying to figure out how we can make that happen, because we absolutely rely on these wonderful people who work for us to keep everything working and going, and all the functions of government active and efficient. And we've run a pretty bare bone budget for a long time in recovery from the financial crisis 10 plus years ago. And we've come out of that, and we have significant reserves. As Becky said, you can't be using reserves for ongoing recurring expenses. It's not a proper practice. But looking at ways to increase non-property tax revenue, one of the suggestions I made earlier in the summer was that we should look at a possible local sales tax or hospitality tax to maybe offset some of the demand for services created by visitors to our resort community. Many resort communities rely on that to balance out the burden of supplying services. So another thing I want to point out is that since January, we've had 25 retirements or resignations from in-town staff positions, and there are some positions that still remain open, that are funded yet open. And part of the reason they're open is because housing is so expensive here. Most people will be coming from outside of town to fill those positions, and the transportation to get here is daunting. The commuter connections back in service, that's a help. But for people who are commuting, the commute times and the less than competitive pay are really obstacles that we have to work to overcome. Looking out into the future, we need to start addressing this now to try to get ahead of it. And so, I appreciate your comments on that. I think it's absolutely critical at this point. We're at a really crucial period, I think, and a transition time, and we can't ignore what we see.
So I just want to add to what Kathy said, because she said everything I would have said. She was directly on point. And Peter, once again, I heard you, float the idea of a hospitality tax, and I think it's something that the business committee will be looking at. We meet tomorrow, and try to help advise the town on where that should go. And happy to.
One of the other things we've done with the non-tax revenue is we, created paid parking at some of the beach lots for non-residents, and that's helpful. But I do think we have to study and engage the public to try to figure out what other potential sources for non-tax revenue we can come up with.
Yeah, we hear the complaints, as Kathy said, through our CACs of things like litter and code enforcement, and quality of life issues are really what keep East Hampton unique, and that's what we want to maintain. So I think it's time that we look, and I appreciate your leadership and helping us get through this, because I think there is a time now for us to consider the non-tax revenue sources.
In terms of quality of life, the budget does include additional staffing in the police department, as well as an additional ordinance enforcement person. I'd like to be able to increase those numbers, particularly in code enforcement, and I think buildings and grounds, in order to provide those services, garbage pickup, and just basically litter as well. They're important. We hear about it on all of the CACs, requests for additional resources to be brought to address these issues, but you can't provide additional resources without funding. So that's really, I think, crucial for us to figure out how to fund the increases.
And the other piece, is the fact that we've got positions that are open, right? And that we just can't fill. And so we need to figure out a way, and what's going to entice to get people hired. And as we mentioned earlier, that is having more competitive salaries.
Okay, any other questions or comments? And if not, we'll move on.
I do, if you don't mind, Becky. There's a couple changes to the actual budget that are over next year. If you just explain it to the public. I think one of them is our civil defense expenditures are increasing right now because we're looking to it looks like we're taking some of the communications aspects of the police budgets and put it into civil defense line. Can you just explain that to me a little?
Yeah, that's a transfer because really those communications aren't just within the police department. They include our townwide emergency communication system, and just felt it was more reflective of that title and that department to separate it out from police and put it in the whole town fund.
So it's more like a transfer or something that's
it's a transfer. It's a budget neutral transfer of,
And another one, so when I started looking also, some of the operations the changes that we did in the past years, particularly in buildings and grounds, I know we increased our part-time staff or custodial staff for COVID cleaning. I'm mentioning that specifically, as we have learned more about COVID over the last couple of years. But I completely agree with you, Peter and Becky. I'm bringing up these comments to try to find the ways that we can try to get the regrades, specifically some of the departments that are, real hands-on, our sanitation, and then also into our highway department. I want to make sure we are comparable to other townships right now out east here, pay that livable wage. So that's why I'm asking a couple of these questions here. When it goes back to our expenditure over maybe 2019 compared to 2022, I would want to take a deeper dive into, do we start cutting that back a little bit and go back to where our traditional custodial staff hours, where that might be a little bit of a savings or back to normal that maybe we can put into regrades in some of our other departments. I saw in the assessor's office, we actually have an increase in subcontract costs. I didn't know, Jeff, if you can explain that, or Becky.
I think with the in the assessors or tax receivers?
Assessors. I thought it was assessors.
I think we had some outside in the tax receiver's
In the tax
office.
receiver. Mm-hmm.
I think it's the tax receiver's office, and that relates to some ongoing help in transitioning from our former tax receiver in training the staff to take over. As you know, we didn't fill that position. We basically combined and through stipend had the town clerk take over that department, and that has overall it's saved us money, but it's increased our outside professional or contractor to come in and assist during tax receiver season. And eventually, I think we'll be fully trained in autonomous and won't have to rely on that. But it may be another cycle of this coming season.
And we did reallocate that money. It came out of part-time salaries, and we reallocated it as a subcontractor cost.
Okay. And going back, I know we were discussing this a little bit last night at my CAC meeting, but as far as parking, I know we were talking non-taxable revenue. I want to continue that discussion with you, Becky, about how if we can anticipate greater non-taxable revenue through parking, how can we offset the budget to potentially, if we are anticipating for 2022, how that might affect us and be able to potentially regrade some of our employees. So Becky, I'll take that, into your office. I'll discuss that a little bit more with you.
If you have a plan that's going to adjust a revenue source or increase, I'm all ears. Please let me know. It's something that we will obviously take a close look at and see how it can affect, the non-tax revenues for next year. Absolutely.
And specifically the B fund, correct? Is what we... Is that right, Becky? Specifically, we'd be trying to target the B fund. Is that correct?
Well, both A and B, have increases this year. So looking at revenue sources for both of them.
Okay. I personally think this budget, it's very tight. We're under constraints that I don't think higher ups in Albany allow us to have the mobility that we might need to as a community on the far east end, and the place where it's very expensive to live right now. I think Albany hamstrings us. I think it's one of the most important roles as a town supervisor can do. And Peter, congratulations for keeping it tight. And I hope that we can find a little bit more wiggle room to increase our living wages and continue to work on the live here, work here philosophy that we have started to implement then too. So I thank you for it, and I'll keep diving into it.
Thanks. I think, trying to find pathways forward to avoid piercing the cap is really important. But ultimately, if we find that we need to take steps and fund in order to provide the services that are necessary and demanded, and to be able to hire and retain staff, that's a critical role that we have to take on, and something that we will need to address. So I wouldn't rule it out as a potential solution. It's something, we want to try to avoid, obviously, at all costs, but it is somewhat arbitrary, especially given the ever increasing costs of providing services and the challenges we have, again, geographically with transportation and the extremely high costs of living here.
And in this regrade review, Kathleen Root and I have been looking at the neighboring towns. We've pulled the contracts from Southold, Riverhead, and Southampton Town during our review.
So we've had some preliminary discussions, and as Becky said, we've discussed those areas. We know where we're much lower than what the other area municipalities are paying. We would like to see upgrades on those to start with. Some of it's clerical, some of it's highway, and then have a comprehensive review across the board, an assessment of all wages paid within the township to remain competitive, really, and to maintain the necessary staff we need to function.
One last one is it might not be the most what everyone's looking at, the most attractive one, but it's a hidden good one. It's in which we're looking to fund movement forward on getting consultation for our energy roadmap, which has been requested from the Energy Sustainability Committee then too. So there's ways that we're able to get this into the budget to continue that long-term forward look also then too. And I applaud you for that, Peter.
Thank you, David. And again, I want to thank Becky and the finance staff and all the department heads. We had a number of 2 weeks worth of solid meetings with everyone and reviewing their requests and having discussions about each of their individual budgets. And I think we're off to a good start, and I look forward to working with all of you to finalize the budget in a way that best serves the people of East Hampton. That being said, I will be speaking with you, Becky, later about some of the other ways we can address this, and in advance of our next work session. Next up, we have.
Can I just ask, Jeff, what were your thoughts on the tentative budget?
I'm of the same mind that we have, competition problems. We're having real issues, bringing in staff. We've had, any number of people that we've tried to recruit who really fit the bill and, came a long way with us in the interviews, and then decided salary was, not enough, or, cost of living and finding housing was too much. So, I see it as a real problem. I think none of us would prefer to pierce the tax cap, but I also agree that these quality of life issues do seem to be, stepping into the forefront with every meeting that I have, all the CACs and the ones that I've attended. And it's that quality of life, those quality of life complaints really matter. These, they're not grand issues, but, littering, speeding, and the like, noise, code enforcement, are really important to people. It's really kind of where they encounter, the town's ability to help them or not help them. And I'm seeing a lot more complaints as well. I'm glad that the tax receiver, we're getting some help. I think that's a good thing, by the way. And just trying to think if there's anything else here. In general, there definitely is a more comment about code enforcement and policing in the town. And, Mike Sarlas had a lot of attrition in his staff, and, has frankly told us that he's understaffed. And that's a hard situation to deal with when you have, neighbors complaining and needing help. And, Mike's a great leader, and, absolutely does a great job with what he has, but he's, had to frankly tell us that he just doesn't have the staff, the bandwidth to do the work. So I'm also interested in the idea of a local sales tax or hospitality tax. That may be a way to get around, real estate tax revenue. That sounds somewhat promising. So, I agree. This is not an easy discussion to have. Because we've got sort of the competing goal of, being fiscally responsible and restrained, and yet providing these services. So we're kind of on a tightrope right now. So.
Right. And speaking of PD, I was talking to Mike, because this is coming up in different meetings that I'm going to. He's down 11 staff members. 7 are on disability, 3 are in the academy, and Suffolk County didn't hold a police academy for 18 months. And he's got 1 open slot. And this season was the busiest season on record. So, and I'm sure every department can paint a picture that, has, similar challenges, so it's, obviously it's incumbent on us to get this right.
To help him. Yeah, that's concerning. It's really concerning, because he's a very good administrator, and he's got a good sense of separating out the important from the unimportant. So it's not like he's dashing around, trying to do everything. And when Mike says he needs help and is understaffed, it means something. And unfortunately, it affects residents in the town. So
I think there's multiple departments we have to look at for that too. But I'm not disagreeing with you. Highway is one of them, in which the competing salaries. Individuals are going to go to other locations. So I want to make sure, that level of wage is increased also.
I believe Steve's down to 11 staff members at this point?
I think 13. The last time I talked to him,
lowest point ever right now.
Yeah.
Yeah, I looked at the figures, and it's real that department has dropped way down in terms of staffing. And I checked in actually with the Justice Court on littering, because we're hearing a lot of complaints about littering. And there was some, talk about, they're not prosecuting enough, or they're not getting enough fines. And the answer I got was, we're not seeing a lot of cases for littering, or I asked also about clearing. And I think that's indicative of the fact that, we need to beef up the staffing on enforcement. No criticism of the departments. It's just they're very short-staffed. And
I think with littering, it's very specific, the law, on how you can actually prosecute somebody on littering. So you need to go back and make sure we understand that part of the law.
Yeah. Well, and Mike has talked to us about that he has to see somebody and identify, see them so that they can actually make a complaint.
Yeah,
that's
I don't
valid
think
about how the littering occurred. So it's tough.
We're not going to see that in justice court.
So I think
we shouldn't have people's expectations thinking they're
right. Because as Mike, I had conversation with him about this. People aren't going to litter in front of a marked police car. Yeah. I mean, they're smart enough, right? So and they have to witness it. So it's a real challenge.
Yeah, and he talked about the transient contractor. I don't want to, damn contractors, but transient people that are working occasionally will toss lunches out, wherever they are. They, nobody's watching. So we're
not going to see that in court. So
I know.
I don't think we're going to solve the litter problem today.
Sorry, we're on track.
But in terms of, maintaining the roadways, we had litter patrol in the highway department that was collecting, garbage that's along the roadsides. Again, that's another position that you could have to address that issue, maintaining the beauty of our community, maintaining everything about the town. And in terms of police staffing, it's not so much that the police are understaffed in the budget. They're understaffed in active officers who are able. The police department has run for a number of years about 10% of the staff are out at any given time, whether it's on maternity leave, injury, disability, and they're on the books, but they're not in the field. And I've had numerous discussions with the chief about trying to increase the number of officers to compensate for what is sort of an ongoing trend. And as Kathy pointed out, we had no ability to hire any new staff because there was no police academy for 18 months. And as soon as one opened up, we got 3 candidates enrolled. There's a 4th person we're looking to hire as well. And in addition, there's more officers that we hope to take on going forward, and one additional code enforcement. But again, we're doing our best to stay under the cap. And I just feel that we're reaching a point where either this year or next, in order to be able to provide the services that the community expects, demands, and requires, that we will have to figure out a way to have more revenue for provision of those resources. So it sounds like everybody's pretty much in agreement with an acknowledgement of where we are and where we need to go. So we'll continue to work forward on trying to address those specific issues, and we'll have further discussion next week.
Yeah, I also want to thank Becky for all the work she's put into this, as well as Nadine and Richard. Thanks, Becky. I know it's your first one with we miss Len Bernard, and we're just happy that you're on the scene and can pick up where he left off. So thanks.
Thank you.
Yeah, I join in that. Really, it's a good team. It was a hard act to follow, and it's a good team.
It's been quite the year.
Yes.
Thank you, everybody. And
Thanks
we'll
again.
be back next week.
Thanks again, Becky.
Thank you.
So moving on, we have NYPA, LED street lighting, and Lauren Steinberg, Natural Resources Department.
All right, letting her know.
Is here to present. Thank you, Jason.
Okay, Lauren Steinberg is in the room.
Welcome, Lauren.
Hello.
How are you this morning?
Good, thank you. So yeah, thanks for having us back on for a continued discussion about LED street lighting. And I'm joined today by some more members of the team at New York Power Authority that are going to go kind of a step further with this discussion. And I would just like to introduce them and just give a little bit of background on where we're at with this discussion, if that's okay. This is something we've been talking about for a little while. Upgrading streetlights is a significant way in which municipalities can reduce their utility costs, energy consumption, and greenhouse gas emissions. Hundreds of municipalities across the state have already upgraded their streetlights to energy-efficient LED fixtures. LEDs are not only more energy efficient and less expensive to operate and maintain, but offer more directionality and control than conventional streetlights. In July, the town board heard a presentation by the senior scientists of the Lighting Research Center at Rensselaer Polytechnic Institute in New York, a highly regarded and internationally recognized research center for lighting research and education, about the benefits and advancements of LEDs from a safety and efficiency perspective. The town has already started the process of converting its streetlights to LEDs. The streetlights in downtown Montauk were converted a few years ago, and moving forward and keeping in line with the town's energy sustainability goals and climate emergency declaration, evaluating the town's current streetlight inventory and converting all remaining conventional streetlights to LED will have a great impact on reducing the town's energy consumption, fossil fuel emissions, and electricity costs. But this is no easy feat, and there are a lot of important different aspects to consider with a project of this scope. So the Department of Natural Resources has engaged with the New York Power Authority, whose smart street lighting program has helped 220 communities in New York upgrade their streetlights to LEDs, including our neighbors, Southampton. At the July work session, the board heard from Jeff Lano from New York Power Authority, who presented a proposal to evaluate the town's streetlight inventory, design an LED upgrade plan, and procure contractors to complete the work. We have asked the rest of the NYPA team to come and to continue the discussion and focus on what would be done here in East Hampton for this project. So I'm going to turn it over to our presenters. I'm going to share their presentation. We have with us Jeff Lano, Jesse Scott, and Kevin Luteran from NYPA, and Director of Electrical Engineering and Lighting Designer, Bo Reed. So I'm going to share this whenever you're ready. Jeff, you can begin.
Sure. You can hear me?
Yes, welcome, Jeff.
Thanks. Thank you very much. Lauren pulls that presentation. I'll get started. So I guess we've done the introductions, but the NYPA team is delighted to be in front of the town board again. We're going to kind of touch on a high level some of the points I presented, I guess it was at the July meeting. But what we've done is I've invited several other folks from NYPA, including Kevin Luteran, our program manager for the Smart Street Lighting New York, Jesse Scott, who's a key account manager and a supervisor of some of us key account reps, as well as Bo Reed, who works with Guth DeConzo, a NYPA procured engineering firm. And Bo has worked on countless LED street lighting projects on Long Island and across the state. And we'll give a deeper dive then into the actual engineering design process so that everybody can have a comfort level in how we make recommendations that best suit your community, and we'll work closely with you on developing those design specs as we go through the actual design, as you'll see. I'll also I'm going to give a brief overview of what NYPA is, why we're allowed to do this work in the municipal space, a high-level overview of the actual program, and then we'll begin to talk about the implementation process and actual taking a high-level look at some initial numbers. But it's important that I do touch on the budgetary conversations that are ongoing with the town, and times are tough and tight, obviously. So what this LED street lighting project allows you to do, also dovetailing with your energy roadmap, is allows you to save money, utilize NYPA money to do the project, basically pay for those project costs through the energy and maintenance savings that you'll realize. So it will have like a minimal effect on your budget and can be structured actually to have a positive cash flow from the project, all while saving energy, improving public safety, reducing your carbon footprint, et cetera. And what many of us account managers who work across the state have learned from talking to smaller sized municipalities like yourself is that about half of the town's energy cost goes to the street lighting. Apologize, phone's on. So it's a safe and highly effective energy efficiency measure to take on as a town. And working with NYPA with a tried and true process is a pretty safe way to do this implementation. So next slide, please. So just as a high level, NYPA is the nation's largest public utility. We generate through 16 operating facilities about 25% of New York State's electricity, with the majority of that coming from hydropower sources, and the largest one being up on the Niagara River. And this power goes to municipal customers as well as economic development customers around the state. In addition to generating electricity, NYPA implements energy efficiency projects across the state, about $300 million a year we work on, many of that with municipalities, and some of that with some of our state customers take on some fairly big projects with NYPA as well. And ultimately our work supports about 400,000 jobs across the state. Next. So as part of our street lighting program, which was announced about time flies, about 4 years ago, they announced it at the governor's office. NYPA was charged with leading the effort across the state to install 500,000 streetlights by 2025. We've really developed a business model and solution to make it easy for municipalities to kind of hop on board with our process and get that work done. And we've installed about 286,000 lights. This last week, I think there was a press release on the 286,000 that went in, I think, up in the Finger Lakes region. And in addition to the street lighting, many of our customers are interested in our street lighting maintenance service, which is a build out from our installing these lights that have a nice long warranty period and very, very infrequent failure rate. So our street lighting maintenance service can combine with installation to really help a municipality save money overall on their entire street lighting system. Next. So at a high level, and we'll talk about some of these things in a little more detail as we go through, but from a high level, the conversion benefits are just, there'll be some overall system enhancements. The town I've developed a proposal that includes asset controllers, so you can dim your lights. It also, you can control them. It allows for even knowing when lights are out, so there can be timely replacements either through our program or your own. And the system really will enhance public safety. The lighting, the LED lighting, while it'll pretty much mimic the amount of light lumens that people will be seeing, it's interesting that the light there is cleaner light, and it allows greater color differentiation, which enhances public safety. And of course, the LEDs will save on energy, improve that light quality so people can see things, see people in crosswalks, the animals walking by the side of the road, people walking their dogs, and et cetera. It will help with that. Reduce your maintenance costs and outages, and leading to health and safety issues potentially.
Jeff, if I may, a lot of what you're going over, we went over in July. So
Okay.
it's a repeat. Could we, fast forward? Could you go quicker through the material you've already seen?
Of course.
Thank you.
If you could advance the slide to the next one, just to see if there's anything. Right, it's just something illuminating the notion of light trespass, light distribution, where we're going to be designing a system that doesn't light people's front yards and backyards kind of thing, where the light will mostly be shining on the roads and even just up to the sidewalk level. So this is just an illustration of that. Next. Again, some of the communities that have done it, and I recommend contacting the Village of Port Jefferson, very similar size project and kind of feel of that community. Next slide. And just to talk about then the stages of this, and this is where we'll start talking and build out from what I presented in the past, but the design and procurement, I know the town is very interested in that. We bring that then into construction after designs are reviewed and approved by the town. And then, of course, we can completely finance the project and then provide the post-installation maintenance service. Next slide. So this is where we start the kind of the newer stuff, the newer presentation, and what Lauren indicated that the town board wanted to hear a little bit more about how we do a project once a project's approved by the town. So what we would do, and this is where Bo and our implementation engineering firm would step in and begin working directly with the town along with a project engineer, is that we're going to start off by having a kickoff meeting with the town. So as many people as the town needs at that meeting to help accurately define the needs of the town and the current lighting situation. We're happy to have folks involved from police, from DPW, town planners, etc., to work with us during this time. We're going to define everybody's roles and responsibilities, who we're going to work with on information gathering for the project. We'll establish a scope of work for the design, how we're going to attack the project, and then again talk about design requirements, any information about specific roadways or walkways that you want us to spend very special attention to. Any construction related items or issues that the town has in place that we would need to know about. So we work in accordance with the town's
codes and work hours, etc. And then we would also talk about a general overview
Jeff.
of the process. Yep.
Oh, sorry. I didn't mean to cut you off. I just wanted to add to and highlight the fact, during this process, during the kickoff meeting and leading up to it even, really gives the town an opportunity to customize their street lighting solution, right? So we can help, recommend certain fixtures, but if you have different aesthetic goals or, perspective of what your streetlight system looks like, this is the opportunity to, bring that to our attention so that as we start to develop the project, we're doing it as a partnership and really creating the project that fits your goals and what you want the overall project and outcome to be like.
Right. So we're here to work with you and have it be very collaborative. Is essentially the point of this kickoff meeting, and really start working together on the details of specifying the lights that we're going to be installing. Next slide. So I think I'd like to hand it off to Bo, who basically has done, he's an electrical engineer, and he's done street lighting design very effectively on Long Island, including the town of Southampton project, and every project that's happened in the Long Island region. So Bo, could you take it from here and handle this next slide or two?
Absolutely. Can you all hear me?
Yes.
Yes, sir.
Thank you very much for having me. It's a pleasure to meet you all. I look forward to potentially working with you all in the future. So I've had the honor of working with many of communities across the state and assisting them in converting their streetlights. In my opinion, it's probably the single most utilized and visible energy measure project that you can take part of. Just about everybody goes outside at some point in time under streetlights. They commute to work, they commute home from work. So ultimately, our number one goal is to create a safe environment, or to maintain a safe environment for your residents, your visitors, and the people that share the roadway with the cars. It's a service that you provide, and most communities provide across the state and across the United States, in order to allow motorists additional time to react in case something happens that they're not predicting. So we take a great amount of care to ensure that we follow with strict adherence the guidelines that are set forth by the IES. And that's really what separates us from any of the other offerings out there, is that NYPA hires engineers to perform these designs. And by hiring a professional engineering firm, we make sure that we follow those guidelines and that we take a systematic approach to the lighting design. As Jeff alluded to, this is a collaborative process. We do not feel that it's appropriate to design in a bubble. You all use your streets, and your police officers, they make sure that those streets are safe. So they tend to know, and your employees tend to know, and your residents tend to know where your pain points are. If you have any areas that are overlit or underlit, that's feedback that we would want to get from the municipality. In that IAS, they set a bunch of guidelines on how to execute a lighting design. And part of that process is doing photometrics. We actually model a group of all of your streets to make sure that we are actually illuminating the widths and the spacing appropriately with the existing infrastructure that you have in place. It's a process that allows us to predict the outcome and accurately be able to tell you which fixture is appropriate for which condition, and it allows us to achieve the proper illumination with the lowest wattage. There's no better way to ensure that you're not going to hurt the environment or provide irritating light trespass than to provide photometric analysis of each of your roadways. It's a very effective approach. It's something that has been thoroughly vetted through NYPA engineering, and it's something that we've done for well over 100,000 lights across the state. We will provide recommendations for you, but at the end of the day, this is your project and this is your community. So you have a tremendous amount of input on design decisions, and we will share with you what we've learned from past projects, as well as what we're seeing in the industry as far as changing technologies and emerging technologies. We lend our experience in this process to help guide you through this project step by step until completion. The nice part about having NYPA and IC such as Guth is that you get a continuation of people throughout the project. Bo Reed, the engineer, I will always be part of this project. I will be there during construction, during design, and even for years after in case there's ever an issue. Our construction management team, you will meet them in the design process. They will help us cost estimate. They will help us facilitate the different items that need to be coordinated as far as the ability to execute a project of this scale in your community with the least amount of impact. So that construction manager is there during the design process and then follows through construction. We have a very good relationship with the implementation contractors in this region. We worked on several projects with them. They're some of the best contractors in the state, and they do a tremendous job of executing this project with very little impact to the community. We work with you to make sure that our schedule doesn't. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Sorry, I don't mean to cut you off. I know you've kind of started to elaborate a little more on the construction phase of the project, which is in another slide or two after this. I'm not sure if we want to just, advance to that slide.
Well, I can back up if you'd like as well.
Yeah, but I think
to just talk about some of those other.
Yeah, Bo, it's important that the town knows that they call, they're working with us on color temperature, which is that Kelvin kind of number that people think you get too high up to 4,000 and it's going to be extremely white, bright light. We would work with you on that. We usually use 3,000 Kelvin to create more of a softer light, more like a moonlight. But part of what Bo will do is in working through the design, it'll be the color of the light, how much light in terms of the lumens, and also the beam spread, so that the lights can be, sort of aimed at the roadway in a different way. We're going to show you a picture of that in a second. So maybe we can go to the next slide, please.
Sure.
Yeah. So
there you are.
Can I just interrupt here for just a minute?
Yes,
to
please.
Kathy's point, I think the board's pretty well educated as to, the different designs and types of lighting. The town's long had a lighting law that requires, commercial properties to consider lumens, color temperature, beams spread and all of that. So I think we're pretty familiar with those kind of, specs and topics. I think what's really important for us to understand is what is the commitment the town would make, and at what point, what are the costs? How is this going to save the town money in addition to, saving energy? I know, at least my understanding is currently with our street Cobra lighting, we pay basically a fee per fixture to the utility PSEG, and depending on what type of fixture it is. So can you address like some of the cost savings of transitioning from our existing conventional Cobra head lights to LED lights, for instance? We did an inventory not too many years ago, and found that we were, not only was there an incomplete inventory, but when we did the complete inventory, we found we were being charged for lights that didn't exist, charged for lights that weren't of the correct type, and that resulted in the utility paying the town $80,000 in overcharges, reimbursing overcharges. So, if you can address that. I understand there's, an initial kickoff meeting to understand what the town's needs are, and they vary from location to location along the highway. And some of our, side streets, we might continue with the Cobra style lights. In the business district of downtown Amagansett and the hamlet of Amagansett, there are Cobra lights that are situated between large deciduous trees, which blocks the spread of, the light beam and create a pattern of light, dark. We've had at least one fatality there in the last several years to a pedestrian. It's very irregular light, and it's problematic. We may want to consider putting more historic type lantern post lights there like we have in downtown Montauk, and making them LEDs to address that, so they're below the tree canopies. So, at what point do we make a commitment with you all, and what is that going to look like? I think that's what's really more pertinent.
Sure. I mean, just to take your comments, Supervisor, in kind of order, the project, rough estimate that I've done, it saves about $35,000 a year in electric costs, which is basically driven by wattage reductions. Comparing what you had at a Cobra head and then lining up the similar lumens from an LED.
So you're basing that, I'm sorry to interrupt you again, but you're basing the $35,000 in saving based on our current inventory if we...
Correct.
Okay.
Right. So
and many times, Jeff, that savings is increased once you go through and do the full design, because we're able to more accurately depict on what that fixture would need, or what that area would need. So a lot of times we see about a almost 65% reduction in cost because of that wattage reduction. Go ahead, Jeff.
Right. Absolutely. I'm very conservative with how I put these initial non-engineered designed estimates together, but Bo is correct. We typically exceed the savings that I propose. from a desktop level. And what we do, Supervisor, is update your register, your street lighting register, and we'll send that to PSEG, so they will have an exact detail of your lighting with the new wattages. We'll tell them what dates each light got installed, and they'll retroactively credit you. And they're usually 2 to 3 months behind in terms of the data inputs, but you will ultimately get reconciled and be on a new wattage run for your monthly invoice from them. Additionally, I projected some savings on maintenance, merely because these lights are going to last at least 100,000 years, 22 years, 100,000 hours, I'm sorry, 22 years. So
I like the 100,000 years better.
It'd be interesting to see what the world's like then. But yeah, so they last a long time, mitigating maintenance concerns. We basically, again, conservatively estimate about a $20 savings per year per light, because you should really be seeing a 5-time decrease in the amount of going out and making repairs and replacements of these lights.
So this particular slide, Jeff, shows what your projected costs are based on the inventory of lights that have now?
Yes, correct.
And do we have a number as to how many?
Total
light fixtures.
Well, what PSEG thinks you have are 729 non-LED lights. I think you have 40 or 50 that are already LED, so I did not include those in this budget estimate.
Yeah, we may have like 120 in downtown Montauk. I don't know what the exact number is down there.
Yeah, so these are just replacing the non-LED fixtures. And actually, I believe there were 41 of these fixtures are considered decorative type fixtures. Okay. So, which are more money. I kind of went with a $500 materials estimate. Again, you could pick something that's more or less than that. There are across the board kind of selections to choose from, and that's what during design, we'll be, investigating in detail what styles you're looking at and pricing them out for you. So there's
Hey, Jeff,
many options. Yep.
I just wanted to highlight one other thing too that's included in this budget, and that's the asset controllers. So these devices replace the traditional photocells that turn the light on and off from dusk to dawn. These are actually network connected lighting controllers, so you can control your streetlights, but more importantly, it gives you a database and software platform to actually see the insight and performance of your street lighting system. So you'll be able to tell when streetlights fail, when they're on during the day, and other issues and troubleshooting features, but it also acts as a system of record. So you have a full database of knowing what equipment was installed at each location, and it's literally a GIS map software system. You can click on every single one of your streetlights and see what was installed, when it was installed, when it was maintained, and it's just a whole host of valuable information into the future. And I think that's a really valuable enhancement as part of our project that's also included in this budget.
If you don't mind me stepping in just to answer your question as far as at which point in time would you have to make the decision on when to move forward? By signing the ATP to allow us to complete the design, you would essentially be at risk for the cost of the design. Once we achieve the 90% design, which would be the full input of the municipality to provide a full retrofit or full upgrade of that system, we would provide you with a report. We would sit down, we would review that in detail with updated project summaries and savings. And that would be a snapshot of what we believe the construction costs will be. At that point in time, you would then be able to bring that report and the information from that final design and bring that to your board. And that's really when your decision-making process starts and stops. Once you review that, and if it meets the needs of the municipality, you can then approve the project, and we would move forward. If you decide that that it's not not what you want to move forward with. All you would be at risk for is the design process portion of that, and then you would be, you would own that design. So that really is when you would have to make that decision on whether or not to move forward.
Can I just chime in here? So coming out of July's work session, I had two concerns. One was, how the project is engineered, because, I know you have a lot of experience throughout Long Island and throughout New York State, but we have our own aesthetic here. We're not, the Northway in Albany or the village of Malvern. So I have concern about, we want, proper lighting, public safety for drivers, for pedestrians and whatnot. But at the same time, we want this to remain and look like and feel like East Hampton, the town of East Hampton, whether it's downtown Montauk or down by the docks or the village of, the hamlet of Amagansett. So to me, biting off the whole project and trying to do 729 lights, which could be, street lights or downtowns or, different areas, different neighborhoods, to me seems like biting off too much at one time, that we should go slower in a sense where we should do maybe a few like projects together and bundle them as opposed to doing all 729 at once, because it gives us more time to look at the individual design plans and make sure that they're right, and also get some installed and say, okay, we're good with that. The community is good with that. Let's move on to the next area. And those are my concerns.
Well, I totally understand. I mean, it's quite an undertaking. My response to that is that we absolutely take the look, the feel, the aesthetics, the performance, the environmental impact, all of that into account when we're doing this. Now, if we're at a town that has 40 Cobra heads, obviously that's a much easier project to just kind of complete and execute without any issue. But we have executed projects along the water. We've executed projects with very quaint historical downtowns. We've executed projects that have 17,000 fixtures in them, that have a multitude of neighborhoods and different fixtures throughout. We've had sensitive environmental impacts. We've had areas that were improperly lit, as the supervisor had alluded to, where we converted those streetlights that were overhead to post tops. We can absolutely segment that design to address all of the different areas and include it into a single design and accomplish what you want. This project's your project. We're not going to push you to execute the project faster than you're capable of facilitating it internally. We're going to walk you through those steps, and we're going to address each one of those concerns or design considerations personally with the attention to detail that's required to properly do it. We do not dictate the design to you. We provide you with recommendations and options, and we work together to make the proper decision that works for your community. I'm not going to come in here and tell you that you have to do this or do that. And at the end of the day, if we provide you with the design and there's an aspect of it that you're not fully capable of, when we sit down and we review that final design, you have full authority to decide that a portion of it or a section of it just really isn't where you want it to be, or you're not ready to move forward with that. And we can either remove that or table it and further evaluate it, even while we work on the project maybe that you have approved. The other option we have, and especially with decoratives and historical nature, is we can absolutely perform mock-ups. we can get some fixtures into your village and we can test some different styles. I can show you different decoratives. We can take a field trip and see some of the other areas that we've upgraded that may be somewhat similar. If there isn't anything similar, then we'll bring in equipment and we'll test it there, and we'll go together and we'll evaluate it, and we'll honestly take and make decisions based on your input. At no point in time are we going to make decisions that you're not involved in. And I have full confidence that we can come to a point in time where you are satisfied with what's been presented, and then we can implement it. We're going through that exact process right now in the historical downtown Saratoga, where we are testing several different fixtures with their historical fixtures that they had. And it's a unique environment, and they have a lot of, it's a couple 100-year-old town, downtown city center. There's a lot of pride. I'm sure Kevin can attest to, since he's a resident of that city. There's a lot of pride that goes into the look and the feel of that city. So we are not rushing through that design. It's going to take a few more months for us to complete it, and that's okay. What you have is you have an engineering firm and people that are capable of assisting you with this on board and available to help you make those decisions. And by signing up for the design of the project, you're not agreeing to convert anything until you're fully satisfied with what we've presented. And we'll take great care to make sure that happens. Me personally, I will be in Hampton working with you, with my other designers, making sure that we and we listen.
Great.
I think it's just an important thing, Kathy, that you should know too, that part of our pricing, as we've learned doing these projects over time, we have fixed rate labor, but you sort of start doing it piecemeal, you're at risk of straying into a higher labor rate because of contractors' mobilization, setup. Once they they'd rather have a trailer with all the lights than have to do, set up and break down 7 different times, let's say, if you broke it down to 100 light sets. So that you'd be taking on more cost that way. But perhaps designing the project and then starting with some targeted sampling is the way to go. So we could really, get resident feedback, get you guys looking at these lights and tweak it accordingly.
Great. Thank you.
Yeah.
Are there any other questions or concerns that may have been brought up that I could directly answer about the engineering process or design process?
I actually have a question, if that's okay. So we've been talking about this for a while now, internally in my department with, some of the town board members and our energy sustainability committee. And, the town has been, like I mentioned, replacing its streetlights with LEDs that are 2700 Kelvin color temperature and are dark skies compliant. And we've gotten some feedback that has said that municipal streetlights should not exceed 1800 Kelvin, which I understand is a kind of an orangey-like color. So I was just curious if you had any thoughts on that from a safety perspective and an efficiency perspective.
Absolutely. I mean, color temperature, it's really a matter of opinion on what people find to be pleasing to them. Some people like a whiter light. Some people like a warmer light. When you're in an outdoor environment, the whiter the light, the better the visual acuity, which I'm not saying is what you should go for. I'm just saying is when you're outside and you have more white light in that light, you're able to discern minor details and colors better. In order to make a LED warmer, you layer phosphors over the chip. And I apologize if I'm getting technical, but I'll stop the technical right there, right? But you layer phosphors over that chip. And then the energy excites that phosphor and that's what creates the light. The more thickness is on that chip, it's like laying blankets over a light bulb. If you lay a single sheet over a light bulb, you can still get a considerable amount of light. But if you layer full blankets over it, you're pretty much going to black out that light. So you have to use a considerable amount of more energy to drive the same light output at 1800 lumens than you would at 3000 or 2700. In my professional opinion, I like 3000 because I have to worry about safety and visual acuity and being able to execute that project in a means that is going to protect the people that are using the roadways. With that said, 2700 is absolutely within 10% range of that. And it provides a nice balance of visual acuity. You do get a degradation of efficiency when you go to 2700, but it's still acceptable and it still saves a really nice amount of energy. Once you drive down to that 1800 lumens, you drop in your efficiency precipitously and you lose a lot of that benefit that you get from the visual acuity of the whiter light, as well as the energy savings of having a LED. I don't personally recommend it. The other issue is that it's very difficult to source those lamps. They're not readily available. And on a maintenance perspective, it's difficult to find them. There's only a few manufacturers that produce that warm of light. And at the end of the day, you're basically going to replace a single spectrum light with a single spectrum light. So you really lose all of that visual acuity benefit for public safety and the ability to see those minor details. So at the end of the day, it's your community, and you should absolutely execute what you feel is the right color temperature throughout your community. I think 2700, when you have environmental concerns and you want to maintain that soft glow that you have with a kind of a sleepy feel and look, is a really nice color to stick with. And I think you've executed the right color to maintain that. And I believe that is the same color that we put in at Southampton. So I don't recommend 1800. I understand where they're coming from. It wasn't but a couple years ago that they were asking for the 2700. So I'm not sure what that means.
Sorry, that was
I've run out of time.
No. You're totally fine. The conference call just kicked in at the worst possible moment. That's all.
I thought it was The Price is Right, and I've lost it or something.
You win a prize.
It was at 1800, man. The second you hit that, sorry.
Yeah. So I would never talk negatively about someone's perspective or what they're trying to achieve by it, because I believe there's merit in all opinions. But the analysis that I've done and the work and the research I've done, and there's a lot of information out there to back it, that you going below 2700 definitely starts to provide more negatives than I believe the positives. And you have very little impact to the environment or to the people at 2700. So I would maintain that color temperature, in my opinion.
Are there other questions?
Professionally.
Are there other questions for the NIPA team or for Lauren?
Not yet, no.
Okay.
Supervisor, just one last thing I wanted to present on this project economics, that it's important just to recognize that we're very conservative with our estimates, and we actually layer in about another 20% contingency and allowance budget. So, which we may or may not need any of that money, and that's for, wiring and arms or even extra lights if the town wanted to, add new fixtures into the project. So we sort of set up a budget for the project and then kind of work below that. And typically, what do we use? About 40% of our contingency allowance budget, Bo, on a project basis?
Yeah, roughly around that. And I would say that the our construction management team in NYPA are great stewards of the financials of the project. And as a taxpayer of New York State, I honestly feel there's no better program, because at the end of the day, all money that isn't spent goes right back to the community or to the project, and it reduces your overall cost. There's no benefit in me ordering substandard products or cutting costs. At the end of the day, our only goal is to provide you with a proper project at the lowest cost delivered. And there, everything is transparent. And it's a nice thing to be a part of that, when you know that anything that is unused can go back to the community, and it isn't someone's profit.
Great.
Just one last point for me is that just looking at that interest rate also at 4% is also high. We're actually below 2% right now through a bond conduit program, or the town is free to borrow money on their own.
Is that something we can finance? Because our rate is about 0.5%.
You can finance
we have
it.
a AAA bond rating, and which we've carefully maintained, and so our borrowing is extremely low.
I'm looking at my sheet. If you could borrow at even at 1%, your positive cash flow is about $8,500 a year, assuming the same costs, the net project cost, which we're pretty sure is overstated at this point, just to be on the conservative side.
So again, the financing we could do independent of you all.
Yes.
So that's something we'll take into consideration as well, because as I said, we do have a very low rate of borrowing, bonding for projects.
Right. And one thing we're not also talking about is the shared services initiative, where we will work with you, and I think the Village of Sag Harbor, if they end up moving ahead along with you, that you're eligible for some shared services grant money, a percentage of your savings. I think it's 95% of your first year savings. So that could also serve to buy down, the actual out-of-pocket cost, making these numbers even more attractive. So.
Understood. Any other questions? We appreciate very much your time, and it's good to see you all again. And we'll continue to discuss a path forward amongst the board members.
Yeah, and thanks for coming back. I know there were a lot of questions that the energy sustainability had heard, and Lauren has articulated them and asked the questions, and we thank her for doing that and for being on top of this project as well. And bringing you guys back, I think, is going to be very helpful in having us consider moving forward.
Absolutely, and we're here to answer any other questions. If something strikes somebody later today or next week or whatever, just Lauren has my email. We communicate regularly, so we'll follow up and get you the information you need to make the best decision.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you all.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for the opportunity.
So Lauren, you're going to stay with us, and do you have another topic to discuss with us? It's the HVAC non-fossil fuel policy for town-owned buildings.
Yeah, so switching gears a little bit, at the August 3rd work session, the Energy Sustainability Committee Chair Paul Muniz, member and former Chair Lena Tabori, and I had presented the committee's recommendation to the town board to replace fossil fuel burning HVAC systems in municipal buildings with electric heat pumps. A copy of that recommendation with the supplemental resolution, which the committee is asking the town board to adopt, was circulated to you guys again last week, and it was posted to the town webpage. But to summarize, the recommendation is asking that the town board adopt the resolution, which instates a policy that when an HVAC system in a municipal building is in need of replacement, either on a planned or emergency basis, rather than replacing with the same kind of gas or oil burning heating or inefficient air conditioning system, heat pumps are pursued to the greatest extent possible. The recommendation also the proposed policy would call for heat pumps also in the design of all new buildings. And the recommendation and resolution also calls for the town to engage with its engineers to determine which systems would be best for its buildings. We discussed at that presentation the importance of this action, as heating and cooling account for more than a third of greenhouse gas emissions from the building sector, electrifying sectors that have historically used fossil fuels. And I apologize, I'm in a very energy efficient room with a light shut off. So
that's good. We appreciate that. Yeah.
Oh, just a second, I apologize.
You're looking okay. We can still see you from the screen glow.
Okay. But just really quickly, electrifying these sectors is important, especially as the town has its own renewable energy goals and as the state works towards the mandates of the Climate Leadership and Community Protection Act for 100% zero emission electricity by 2040. We also discussed the advancements in alternatives to fossil fuel burning heating, like air source heat pumps and ground source heat pumps, which are significantly more energy efficient and can heat and cool using the same equipment. In addition, other benefits to heat pumps include lower operation and maintenance costs compared to oil or propane, no emissions from on-site burning of fuels, no risk of carbon monoxide leaks, and heat pumps dehumidify better than standard air conditioners, resulting in less energy usage and more cooling comfort in the summer months. This is not something experimental that we're looking at. New York municipalities are already choosing electric heat pumps over fossil fuel heating in their municipal buildings. Some examples include the town of Southampton, who installed air source heat pumps in their town hall, the town of Hempstead, whose Department of Conservation and Waterways Administration building runs on a ground source heat pump or geothermal heat pump, the town of Gardner in Ulster County, installed a ground source heat pump in their town hall, and the city of Saratoga Springs installed a ground source heat pump at a community recreation center. So choosing these more energy efficient and cleaner heating and cooling technologies over fossil fuels by climate conscious municipalities is becoming more common practice. It's also worth noting too that municipalities around the country are taking action to eliminate emissions produced from the private building sector as well, such as Berkeley, California and Seattle, Washington, who have restricted fossil fuel infrastructure in new construction. And also at that August work session, Kathy mentioned that the engineer recommendation for the East Hampton YMCA renovation included replacing the building's gas-fired heating system with electric heat pumps, which was great to hear. So East Hampton is on the verge of this transition to electrifying its buildings, but the town board memorializing this effort as a policy will help to ensure that that continues. So I'm bringing this recommendation to the board again for your consideration, and can have the resolution on for this Thursday if the board is ready to vote.
So this specific policy also is in alignment with our climate declaration and to be considerate of any kind of impacts to climate due to new construction, buying vehicles for our fleet, et cetera, et cetera. So I'm prepared to vote on it.
Lauren, do you potentially see any of our buildings that would not be able to use that technology based on placement or location of the buildings to other, to the ocean or to the bays where it might rust or anything like that? Is there any reason there might be that caveat?
Not to my knowledge. I think having our engineers, and we hired two very good engineering firms that are experienced in these technologies, involved in that decision-making process is going to be really important moving forward, especially with deciding, if geothermal would be feasible in some locations. The soil conditions and other conditions might be a factor for those systems in some buildings. But these are not new technologies. They've been around for a while, and they've been installed in all sorts of climates around the country. So this is not it's not anything that I foresee it being a major issue. But that's definitely something that we can talk to our engineers and experts about when we get to the point where we're deciding on what to do.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments?
No, I just want to thank Lauren because she does this deep dive into all of these new not even new technologies, but technologies. And I want to thank the Energy Sustainability Committee, particularly Paul Muniz and Lena Tabori, who have worked tirelessly to make sure that the town is on the right path and moving forward to get their 100% renewable goal. And so I think it's time, and I hope we can see it in on Thursday night as a resolution.
Thursday at 2.
Thursday at 2, sorry. Old habits.
Yeah.
Yeah, and thank you, Lauren, for helping us move forward and the energy sustainability with our goals for cleaner, greener. If there's no other comments or questions on this topic, we'll move on to the next cleaner, greener topic. Again, Lauren's presenting. And this is the additional charging stations. So we have Severo Christovich joining us from Buildings and Grounds to discuss improving and expanding the infrastructure for electric vehicle charging at Town Hall. So I'll leave it to you, Lauren.
Okay, I'm going to pull up a presentation that we've prepared. In just a second. Let's see if I can find it. If you want to get started, Severo, I will pull this up in just a second. Here we go.
Good afternoon, Mr. Supervisor, Town Board. My name is Severo Christovich, Building Maintenance Supervisor. I work on capital projects for the town. As I've seen the move in the near future for renewable energy, EV vehicles and equipment, I got nervous. And it's not because of the movement for environmentally friendly equipment, but for the lack of infrastructure to support such a move. It's not just the town that is making the investment and move. A lot of auto manufacturers are also making promises as well. These numbers are all accurate as of 2 weeks ago. So by June 2030, the UK will ban the sale of all diesel and gas-powered vehicles, and that's a huge statement. Kia and Subaru will have 40% of its production EV. Mitsubishi and Mazda will be at 50%. Volkswagen will be at 60% of total production. By 2035, Volkswagen and Audi declare that it will stop producing internal combustion vehicles altogether. And the interesting one is that GM aims to eliminate diesel and gas powertrains in its entire light-duty truck lineup, which are 1500s, with the entire operation being carbon neutral. And that's by 2035. Earlier this year, I called a meeting with David Leese, Lauren Steinberg, and Matt Jedlicka to brainstorm ideas for a solution to prepare the town for a very rapid and needed change to our push for EV and alternative fuel vehicles. This idea laid out in this presentation are some of the conclusions that we came up with, which was to make us prepared for this change, as this change is happening, and have a plan for further expansion over the next couple of years as well. And going into project justification, to start off, I'd like to commend the entire town board for being super progressive with your adoption of the fleet efficiency policy. In order for us to reach the goal of minimizing our carbon footprint, we need to first prepare to have a way to charge all of the current and future vehicles we are progressing towards in our current fleet. To outline the immediate need for infrastructure at Town Hall and 300 Panago Suites, I've compiled a list of all current use in 2020 capital requested vehicles, and I've organized it into the following breakdown. And again, these numbers that are here are only between 300 and Town Hall. So, shockingly, with a total number of 101 vehicles between 300 and Town Hall, 40 of these are exclusive to 300, which we're not allowed to put any charging stations on because we only own the suites. 7 of these are located at Town Hall compound. 9 of them are at the police annex. 6 are at EOC, 1 at motor pool. 1 is at emergency communication, and Parks and Buildings and Grounds has 38 vehicles. By vehicle type, these 101 break down to 13 cars, 31 SUVs, 7 vans, 18 light-duty trucks, 17 heavy-duty trucks, and 15 super-duty trucks. And finally, by fuel type, we have 19 diesel, 67 gas, 8 hybrid, and 7 EV vehicles. So with the current ability of 6 charging stations at Town Hall, you can see how we're in need of a solution. Every year will show an increase of vehicles going from gas to electric and exponentially increasing the need for more charging stations. Now, if we envision just 1/3 of these vehicles to be electric in 5 years, that would be a minimum of 33 vehicles. And I honestly think that number is very small. So that with the new 20 new charging ports that we're putting up for shared use, you can see how it will not be enough in a very short period of time. What we are presenting is a solution that is expandable. The costs will have to be met eventually, given enough time. So I ask you to look at what we are presenting as an absolute necessity to start. It can be broken up into stages as long as it is engineered now for further expansion. So, and then finally, with Westchester and Suffolk County announcing 2 weeks ago that they plan to convert the county fleets to all electric by 2030, it will be very soon that we will see grants become available for municipal use vehicles only. And this is where we can increase capacity and reduce cost. So when looking at different concepts presented by Matt Jedlicka from LK McLean, please take into consideration it's the overall scope and realize that it can be broken down into yearly fiscal stages. And with that, I'll introduce Lauren.
Thank you, Severo.
Can I just ask Severo, could you send those numbers around that you said how the fleet breaks out?
I can actually do better. I'll shoot you my Excel sheet that is, you can break it down however you would like. I have little drop-down menus on the top and organize it in any fashion. I'll shoot that over in the next couple minutes.
That'd be great. Thank you, Severo.
Sure.
Yeah, and we can't talk about project justification without talking about how East Hampton is a leader in energy sustainability. We're recognized by the state and other municipalities for our renewable energy goals, our climate emergency declaration, and our work to address greenhouse gas emissions from the transportation sector, which, according to NYSERDA, is New York's largest source of emissions. The town completed the NYSERDA Clean Energy Communities Program High Impact Action for clean fleets for having electric vehicles in its municipal fleets. For that accomplishment, we received a grant, which we used to purchase even more electric vehicles for our fleet. At the end of 2020, like Severo had mentioned, the town board adopted a fleet efficiency policy to ensure the continued electrification of the town fleet. This year, the Parks and Ordnance Department received plug-in hybrid electric SUVs, and the Planning Department is receiving a battery electric vehicle. The town has also established an EV charging station network that's available for both fleet and public use that consists of level 2 and DC fast charge charging stations. The EV charging station is located at Town Hall and the Gansett Village parking lot and the municipal lot on South Euclid. And apologize, my light is out again. Do get very frequently used, and for the town hall charging stations alone, we in 2020, as of October 1st, have seen 290 charging sessions, and that was about a 50-50 split between the fleet and public use. And sorry, I'm going to try and get my light back on again here.
Good to know that the automatic shut off was working there. So when somebody leaves the room,
Yeah.
it thinks that you've left the room because you're too still in there, and the lights do go off. So
Yes, I'm not fidgeting in my seat enough, I guess.
Work to save on electric costs.
Yes, it definitely works very well in here. Anyway, so just demonstrated by the use of the stations and the people that we've spoken to while using the stations, as well as the phone calls that I get from the public that are very happy that we have this service available to the community. It's pretty easy to see that this network of charging stations does provide a great service to the community, and as we've discussed, allows us to support the unlimited use of our fleet's electric vehicles. So as Severo had mentioned, planning for the continued electrification of the town's fleet, as well as supporting the public's adoption of electric vehicles, will require likely making more EV charging opportunities available. I'll go over this in a little more detail later, but there currently is a DEC grant available that I'd like to apply for to fund the town installing additional EV charging stations at Town Hall. And finally, this project is a great opportunity to incorporate renewable energy and energy storage, both from a sustainability perspective, but also resiliency. We'll discuss that a little bit later as well, too. So the scope of this project that we're proposing includes the installation of 20 level 2 charging ports or 10 dual port stations for the use by the municipal fleet as well as the public in the parking lot for Town Hall, adjacent to the EV charging stations that are currently there. Basically creating sort of a charging hub, an EV charging hub. Another element of the project that we're asking the board to consider is the expansion of that parking lot through the addition of another lot on the north lawn behind that existing parking lot. This parking lot would provide a location for more EV charging stations to be installed in the future as the number of fleet EVs grows. It can provide space for parking for fleet vehicles as well as for some of the other vehicles that we have stored on that lawn there currently. And it also provides the option for renewable energy via solar carports. As mentioned, the project has the opportunity to incorporate renewable energy. This new EV charging hub can be interconnected with solar so that vehicles can be charged with renewable energy, and the stations would be grid connected, so additional power produced by solar would be fed into the grid. And the last two bullets tie into each other because something to consider when you have vehicles whose fuel source is electricity is what to do in the event of a grid outage. So incorporating battery energy storage will provide energy backup to the EV stations in that situation. And the interconnection with the solar energy generation component can allow the entire system to operate independently, basically like a microgrid. Allowing the whole system to island in the event of an outage. This resiliency element will also support the fleet, but can also support the public who may have EVs and may not have battery backup at home to charge their vehicles. And one additional option that we can consider is that the energy storage can be used to power critical loads at, say, Town Hall, for example, if backup power to the EV charging station is not needed for a particular grid outage. So there are many directions that this project can go to support the town's commitment to energy sustainability. So this slide just serves to show where on Town Hall campus we're talking about for the charging stations, the solar, the parking lot, and the storage. And I'm going to introduce Matt from one of the town's retained engineering firms, L.K. McLean, who has been helping us tremendously with the preliminary planning of this project. He'll be reviewing several options for the layout of the different elements of this project, which include the 20 EV charging ports, parking lot expansion, solar and battery storage systems. So Matt, whenever you're ready.
Hey, good afternoon. So as part of the schematic design, we went through several different options. One of the constants that we carry through for each of the options are the 10 dual charging stations that are along the western side of the parking lot at Town Hall. So those 10 stations, that's 20 cars. And also part of the constant is an electric service. So the next part of the different options that we had to look at was solar assisted vehicle charging. So in this particular option, we showed the solar panel arrays along the western boundary. The concern that we had in this particular case would be, tree coverage and having to potentially cut down some of the trees along that boundary. Lauren, if you want to go to the next slide. So in the next case, we maintained the 20 stations along the western boundary, but added about a half an acre parking lot in the northern section. So that northern section, the way the parking configuration is shown, there's a canopy over each of the parking areas. The canopies would have the solar panels on top of the canopies. Everything would feed back into a battery storage area in this particular case, and you would have, in that case, you would have an additional 66 plugs. So if you go to the next option, Lauren, this option is just a slight shift of the parking area. In this particular option, we're trying to maximize the southern exposure of the canopies, but it's essentially the same situation as the option B1. Option B1, you have canopies that essentially are facing east-west, which is not the ideal direction to get the most out of the solar. If you want to go to the next one, Lauren. So finally, what we looked at was we carried the 10 charging stations in the front. We added the parking feature to the north, the additional 40 or 46 parking stalls, whichever configuration you had. And then the thought in this particular case, option C1 and C2, was to have basically a small solar farm, a half-acre solar farm in the back, which would feed the batteries and assist with the solar charging. The next slide is just a slight variation. It's a schematic. So the solar, right now the solar farm is facing due south, but if it made sense to make it parallel to the buildings and parallel to the property line, that could be done as well. But like I said, it was like a multi-step process, keeping the first 20 plugs in the front throughout each of the different options. The first option having a small solar array on the western side to assist with the charging. But then, considering that the town's going to need in the future a significant increase in plugs, we felt that lawn section in the north was a nice spot for an added parking. And, you'd already have the infrastructure in place with the first, the grant portion, which would be the electric service and the first 20 plugs. You'd have that infrastructure in place, and you could just keep expanding. Whether or not the parking lot is the way it's shown this way, or if it's the other configuration, or the same thing with the solar panels. If the town wanted to have some sort of canopy type situation, both parking lots could have the canopies set up. Or we could go with the solar farm. One thing to keep in mind, we're kind of considering it a solar assisted vehicle charging type setup. It just depends on how many solar panels you have. The first option is not going to supply many cars with a full charge off the solar panels. Ideally, you're feeding a battery, the battery is storing the charge, and then when people plug in, there's the charge from the battery, which will go into the cars. So those are the various options. It's essentially 3 different options. They're kind of different between the first and the second and third option, and then the second and third option just have 2 different configurations with the parking.
So Matt, currently that area where the north parking lot is shown there is used for storage of tractors, beach rake, other equipment.
Right.
And has there been a consideration as to where that displaced equipment and storage goes on the property?
I can actually answer that since most of it is in the department I work in. What I kind of feel is that these are more idea concepts to kind of show different circumstances that we could do. I think that the biggest problem we have with that back parking area is that we literally have no rhyme or reason to how we lay it out. It's a matter of reorganizing the way that the vehicles pull in the parking lot area. And I had a talk with David about it the other day. In the current slide that you see on C2, what I would suggest is kind of opening up, getting rid of the last 2 parking spots or 3 parking spots on the northwest side and create an entry and exit area onto the grass field. Now what you can do is you can enter and exit from the roadway to the right side into the grass field in the left. And with enough space and enough engineering on it, you can easily do it with a trailer. The key element is that if you see it with the solar farm in the way that it is in the back, it would require us to come up with an alternate way to be able to park the vehicles. And a lot of that really comes down to the fact of understanding what the problem is and coming up with a legitimate solution. I think the most important thing is realizing the necessity for something. If we don't do something, we're eventually going to have enough vehicles that we have no way to charge them. And I think, just to put it out there as well, in the parking situation that we're suggesting, it's just a concept. We can make it smaller, bigger, however we like. And I think that making a parking lot sooner and having the conduit run, so for future expansion, we can plan on just literally bolting in systems and connecting it to the current service. It would reduce costs down the line and would essentially be able to commit to a longer term project down the line.
So Vero, I agree with you that, we need to be considering future expansion and to provide infrastructure to meet our growing need over time. I wonder if there was consideration given to utilizing some of the existing parking opposite of the courthouse, between this police substation and the courthouse, for charging. Was that ever considered, running the conduits that way to use that existing space?
Only issue with that is that you're sort of cutting up the brand new parking lot that we have. Is it possible? Anything is possible. So
you couldn't go along the edge of the parking lot?
Yeah, well, that's what I was going to ask the same thing, because there you've got the right, it looks like you've got the right exposure if you're backed into that grass where the old town hall came down, and there's no trees to clear. I mean, I'm looking at out my window and there's a whole tree line between us and the farm next door. So,
well, I'm thinking in terms of the actual charging units.
Yeah, me too.
You could have them faced along the western portion of that parking lot that goes back where the COVID testing is.
Sure.
That line.
And as far as where the vehicles go,
you would just run the conduit along the north side of the existing parking lot, and then to the east, and then north up along that row of cars for charging stations as well. Is that something that we could look at or should look at?
Absolutely, we could look at that. And I mean, from another perspective, that is a closer environment to 300 as well. I think definitely if you're looking at adding the solar into it, it's a matter of how can we expand the solar enough to actually do something. You can look at it in a concept. They make these charging stations that I've seen with Lauren where they have the canopy built over one charging area. You're not getting any real power. It's not like the sun's providing much to that vehicle. But when you have it combined with a battery, because let's just say that we have a great big storm and we lose power. There is no generator that we can purchase that is going to run all of those charging stations. Although if you have a big enough battery, according to Lauren and Gordian, I believe, came up with the numbers, that you would be able to charge 10 vehicles a day times 2 days. That means 20 vehicles in 2 days could be charged just off the battery if you bought a large enough battery.
So I'll just chime in here. So I think primarily the location of the initial thoughts for the design to keep everything onto the west side of campus, because that's where the least amount of infrastructure is currently on campus. It would be the easiest run to get it to the electrical conduiting or the main feeds are from the street without inhibiting anything that's been already installed for the current generators as such. This project, first of all, I think we should go ahead and look into getting the grant funding or the grant application to see if we can get the funding for the charging stations. This is definitely a need. One of the biggest selling points is what Lauren mentioned earlier and what Severo was just sort of talking about. If we do get this to a point where it can be solar, I've always been interested in a wind turbine on campus, something to that effect, that we can actually store the energy here in a case of emergency in the town. We are now island, and we can still govern the town in an emergency capacity from the town hall complex through non-fossil fuels. And I think that's something that's very, very intriguing, and I think there might be grant funding for that also. I'm hesitant in the back left-hand corner because of putting solar fields in that location because of we don't have any other storage space, and we have so many, not even in the town of East Hampton for our municipal government, and all the departments back there that I'm not sold on taking that away yet. If we phase it in, I'd like to know what is Rick? What do they need back in the car shops and furthermore back there? As far as the solar panels on the western side, I think I'm more sold on that. I know, Kathy, you were just saying the line of trees there. Inside that line of trees is all types of old wood and concrete and metal that was from the initial construction here. A lot of those locust trees have just grown in. So I'm wondering if we can still get solar panels there and elongated up the side on there. Those are my initial thoughts, but I like the project moving forward. I know we're under a little bit of a time constraint for the grant application.
Yeah, and I support moving forward with the grant application, and I think there's some maybe some further discussion and review of where we would expand the next set of charging stations beyond the proposed 10 dual ports that are shown on the western side of the front parking lot. We still have those other areas for expansion, and I think we should consider taking another look at the northern parking lot by the EOC and Justice Court building, that parking lot, to see if that makes sense to connect and expand as well.
So just as far as kind of why we stuck to the western side, we were kind of trying to marry the solar with the EV charging. And it just seemed like that section, being wide open, had the most availability for the most solar panels. If we have the infrastructure put in with the grant where you have the 20 plugs plus the electric service, you could always come off of that electric service and run across next to the police and up onto the northwestern side, by the communications building. That would definitely be something that you could do. It was just that if we were going to try to, include the solar with those charging areas, I didn't think that that was the place that you wanted to have any sort of parking canopies or anything like that. But it's certainly, it's doable. The contractor would have to be careful with the excavation, running the conduit over there. But you do have, the grass area that you could install each of you could probably fit another 10 stations. So another 20 plugs on that side over there.
But you could also maybe reverse the parking and the solar, put the solar closer to the substation where that second proposed parking lot is, swap those two. That's something that we looked at as well. So at this point, we're talking about having a firm decision on the 20 ports, the 10 dual ports, and consideration for additional expansion over time for the rest. Is that right?
Yeah, so we have, I'm just going to skip ahead a few slides to this one about the grant. So there's this grant opportunity that I'm hoping to pursue for $250,000 from the DEC per location for installation and supply of the charging stations. There's a 20% cost match required of the town for this grant opportunity. If the charging stations are going to be shared use between fleet and the public, which in our case they will be, we have to have some sort of shared use plan in place where the charging stations will be made available to be used by the public for the majority of the time. I mean, in this case, and like the charging stations we have here now, those charging stations and these new ones will be available for public use 24/7. There's going to be no limitation on any member of the public that wants to use those stations, but they will be used by the town fleet vehicles as needed. So Severo and I kind of talked about, putting a time in place when the fleet vehicles could interconnect and then when they would have to be removed by the following day, because most of our fleet vehicles are going to be charged overnight when our staff is gone for the day. But the request for applications for this grant is due on October 29th. The work that we're submitting for reimbursement by this grant has to be completed by May 21st of 2023. So I have submitted the grant intake form to our finance department, and I have a resolution ready to go for Thursday for the town board. And then, as soon as possible after that, I'm prepared to submit that grant application if the board wants to proceed with that. Part of this too would be to know how the board feels about pursuing that larger electric service to plan for future addition of charging stations, because that would be something that we could claim as match for this grant, and then be ready to go to just put in charging stations because the electric service is already there to accommodate.
You know what the cost of that service would be?
So we got some estimates from McLean. So for the service for these 20 charging ports, and I think, Matt, it was up to an additional 20 charging ports, $245,000.
Yeah, I mean, that's almost as much as the grant per location, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it says 500,000 per municipality, 250,000 per location. So we're talking about the 250,000 because it's one single location, right?
That's
so
correct.
20% is 50,000. So it's well over what our match would be. That's a very significant amount of money for the service. And you're saying that would power 40 chargers. Is that correct, Matt?
Oh, we can. It just depends on exactly if we're planning on bringing a 3-phase service in. You could do a 208, or we could bring in a 480 where you'd have to have a transformer. So the one option, we could have almost 50 cars or 50 vehicles charged off of it. But if we modified the service to a 480, with a step-down transformer, you might be able to get up to 80 vehicles on something like that. And the cost of that service, it's about the same.
And that's something that would have to be done at once. It's not like you're going to upgrade that service line.
Yeah, you couldn't
handle the extra.
Right, you couldn't upgrade it. That's the whole idea.
You have to do it up front, and that looks like $245,000 to do that.
Yeah, it's about that.
I think it's important also to realize that like a lot of it's not just our town that's going to be using electric vehicles. You could see by how the car manufacturers are moving right now, all of the public's going to be doing it too. So we're eventually going to be at a standstill where we're going to be fighting with the public, and I think it's just a very important aspect to, at least what I would like the town board to consider is to allow us to come up with a little scope of the project that may include the larger service so we can get a capital project moving this year, or 2022.
Okay. So the grant application is due by the 29th of this month. Do you know when they will make a decision as to when the grants would be awarded? Because we're more than 18 months out from a completion date requirement.
So the applications are reviewed and awarded on a rolling basis. They have been doing a lot of promotion of this application opportunity. So I think the sooner we can get our application in, the better, and then we can know what we're awarded and move forward with the next steps. And, from a capital project plan perspective, I know that those have to be in relatively soon too. So to know what we would be able to put into for 2022 is definitely helpful as well.
Okay, so the issue of the service is not something we have to decide at this point in the grant process. It's really the charging stations in that location, right? Not further expansion.
I guess for capital planning, we would need to know.
Yeah, but in terms of submitting for the grant and being awarded the grant, we don't need that question resolved.
Correct.
Okay, good to know. That's helpful. I would support going ahead with the grant application. Other board members?
Yeah, I just want to remind us, and Peter, you can correct me. We put in $250,000 for energy, in the capital budget and can we use some of that for part of this? I know we were using it to perhaps offset the difference in price between fossil fuel cars and electric cars. We were going to use it for, that kind of and I don't know what's left out of that capital budget. The whole thing.
Yeah, the capital plan, monies that aren't spent in that particular year, monies that weren't spent in this particular year can be rolled to the next year.
Yeah.
That's something, we'll discuss in our overall review of the capital plan, which we normally do in January. I know departments are being asked to submit ahead of our discussions, those, right, so they can be compiled and prepared for presentation. But, that's definitely something we can look at. I agree with the comments that we need to look at improving and expanding the infrastructure for electric vehicles. That is the direction that we're all going. That's a worldwide movement. Severo talked about car manufacturers transitioning away. That's already begun. That's where the market's headed. As a municipality, to meet our needs, we need to prepare for that. And individuals, I think in many cases will be installing charging capabilities in their own homes as well. But, if you're out and about and you're running low, you need to find a charging station. So I agree this is something we have to continue to push forward on. And, I appreciate all the work from staff and Matt Jedlicka from LK McLean to help present this and help us better understand what our options are here.
Yeah, I'm definitely in favor of moving forward.
I favor it too. Yep. I'm in favor of it.
I support it.
Okay. Well, I think you have the indication that you need there, Lauren, and we'll look forward to a resolution to have an upcoming meeting ahead of the grant deadline to submit our applications.
All right, yeah, great. That resolution will be on Thursday, and then I can submit right after that. Thank you very much for hearing not just this, but everything that I presented today. We definitely look forward to hearing more about your thoughts on where we can, site solar in coordination with this project. The option is always to not include it, but, I know that this board is always been very supportive of renewable energy. And I know that that's something that, we are going to give serious weight to.
Yeah, we look forward to further exploring that possibility. I know we've put the solar there on the Parks building roof, and there's the battery storage project, combined with that. We changed out our generator to gas powered generator for backup instead of the old diesel one some years ago. And, again, this is all part of our commitment to moving towards renewable energy to address climate change. And also, in many cases, this has been saving the town and taxpayer dollars significant amount of money. The lighting that we changed out in Montauk a few years ago, when I pushed to get those lights retrofitted with LEDs, it's saving us about $18,000 a year, I think, in that one district alone. So, if we can be more efficient, save money, and support protection of the environment, those are all great things. And we really appreciate you and the rest of the Natural Resource Department and you, Severo, for helping us understand and guide us forward in our efforts to meet a climate smart, mandate.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you. So next up, we have draft legislation for reducing the speed limit on 3 Mile Harbor Hog Creek Road. And Kathy, you've taken this on. And
Sure. So if you remember back on September 2nd, we had a public hearing to amend the posting of the speed limit on Hog Creek Road between Kings Point and Springs Fireplace Road to go from 35 to 30. When John pointed me in the direction of vehicle and traffic law, specifically section 240-52, there's only 3 areas or sections of Montauk Highway where the speed limit is anything but 30. So it was just interesting that that 3 Mile Harbor Hog Creek Road, I guess it just was a continuation of the county road, and the speed limit has, been 35 miles an hour. So when we had that public hearing, we heard from some members of the community that said, well, why not take a more global look at this? It's not just that section that needs to be addressed. And then you've probably gotten emails. There's a new community group that's come to fruition in Springs, and they are the Springs Citizens for Civility. They've met for the last couple of weekends, and they're full and part-time residents that are interested in a number of issues, including public safety, particularly litter and speeding. And they are very supportive of reducing amending the posting from 35 to 30. So the county road ends at the north, part of Copices Lane on 3 Mile Harbor Hog Creek Road. And now, since we started with and would go to Kings Point Road, because we've already done Kings Point to Springs Fireplace Road, we adopted that at the September 23rd board meeting. So this would be, I would have a notice for public hearing on Thursday. We'd have the public hearing later this month. Just looking at the date, I think it's October 21st at 11 o'clock to amend this posting so that 3 Mile Harbor for the entire portion of the town would be 30 miles an hour. And I know we'd gotten an email from a resident saying, wait a minute, you're calling this 3 Mile Harbor Hog Creek Highway. That's not how we refer to it. But if you look, John, correct me if I'm wrong, at the Suffolk County tax maps, is that what it is?
That's right. That's what the tax map shows.
It shows it's Copices Lane, it's Kings Point Road, and it's Hog Creek. It's 3 Mile Harbor Hog Creek Highway. So that's why it would be noticed as that. And it's just about 2.68 miles of road, and we've already, adopted. I think it was just a little bit over a mile when we went from Kings Point to Springs Fireplace Road on that on Hog Creek. So
I think it's important to mention that stretch of road from Copices to Hog Creek Road, where there's that 90-degree right turn, is one of the most dangerous sections of roadway within the whole town in terms of the number of accidents that have been there over the years. And that's due, I think, in part to the fact that road is narrow, like many of our rural roads here in town, but it's also quite hilly and windy as it moves along the edge of the east side of the harbor there. and it's very heavily trafficked, unlike Springs Fireplace, which is generally pretty straight and flat, going across the spine of Springs. The west side of Springs along the harbor is really quite hilly, windy, and blind curves and dangerous.
Yeah.
So.
And darker because of the trees and whatnot. So I think I've talked to Steve Lynch, I've talked to Chief Sarlo. They're all supportive of this. The community is asking for it. So I'd like to hold a public hearing later this month.
Board members, any other comments?
No, I'm in favor of it. Yeah, anything to lower the speed limit. So this is not a big ask, Kathy.
Okay, thanks very much. At this point, we can move on to liaison reports.
Sure. So I guess it was 10 days ago, we closed on that beautiful 7-acre property we know as Hvac on Abraham's Path, just adjacent to the Terry King Ball Field, which will be the future home of our new larger senior center. We've also, which was all good news. And then we did get RFPs back. I think we've mentioned that before. We got for the architectural design and engineering of the new center. There were 15 proposals. Over last week, the committee met over a couple of days and they've narrowed down the list. And we're expecting to have those interviews later this month. So I'm hoping in November the committee will be able to come to the work session and make a recommendation on who we're proposing to be, design and engineer the new senior center. Springs Fireplace Road reconstruction is still ongoing. As everybody remembers, it's a $6.7 million county project, and there's been great coordination between County Legislator Bridget Fleming's office and myself and the town. The county now is doing the asphalt curbing, and they still need to finish the striping from Abraham's Path up to Woodbine. The feedback that I've received has been tremendously positive. Neighbors nearby are saying the road is quieter, the drainage has been vastly improved, and the sidewalk now, which goes from North Main Street on the county portion all the way up to Woodbine, is safer and seeing a lot of action. People are getting their daily exercise, parents with strollers, little kids learning to ride a bike for the first time. So, it's interesting everywhere I go. There's people that live in Springs are saying this is a tremendous improvement, to those that don't live in Springs that are saying, or travel that corridor saying, why can't we do this in our area of town? I think it came up last night, David.
Yeah, I was going to say, Montauk
we want what they have, right?
It did come up at the Montauk CAC last night, and how the infrastructure project, which I think is one of the largest one the town has done, Kathy. So well done on orchestrating and that, moving that forward. They liked it. They wanted to see more of it. And if I could just add on to this, so I drive that street a dozen times a day, with all the kids. And recently, I think it was yesterday with the rain, I had to get my daughter to school at 7 a.m. and it was pouring cats and dogs. And then about 4 weeks ago, it was pouring even further cats and dogs. And the drainage was superb on it. There was no puddling on there where traditionally you would hydroplane in other areas. So it was safe. I actually use it. I always like going past the water in the harbor on 3 Mile Harbor to get back home. It's just nice, but I go down Springs Fireplace Road because it's just a little bit safer right now than with the turning lane. So thank you, Kathy. Sorry, I digress. Apologize.
And then I just wanted to touch base. Suffolk County Water Authority is doing a water main extension on 3 Mile Harbor Road. There essentially 4,000 feet of water main is going in for new customers along 3 Mile Harbor, from Folkestone to 291, which is right around the Harbor Bistro. The project started last Wednesday and should take approximately 11 days. I will say, I've driven by there a few times, and they're moving quickly. So that work is being done. And then I just wanted to touch on emergency communications in Springs and just give an update. Last week, John Jilnicki, Jameson McWilliams, Eddie Schnell, Joanne Pilgrim and myself met with the CEO of the Nassau County Girl Scouts and a representative from American Tower to discuss the potential for the 185-foot tower that could house the town's emergency communication system, because as we all know, we need to close that loop in Springs. And the meeting was very well received. You know, it sounds very promising. And right now, American Tower is drafting an agreement that they should be forwarding to the town shortly. So that's good news. So hopefully we'll see that, and that'll be a subject of a meeting upcoming. And that's what I have for my liaison report.
Thank you, Kathy. David? You're on mute, David.
Just want to get everything back. The Montauk CAC met last night via Zooms. Nice meeting. They were discussing a couple of community events that are upcoming this weekend. Is the Chamber of Commerce's Fall Festival that'll be happening downtown Montauk. Anyone likes some nice clam chowder, please come on down and enjoy. We had a member of the community representing the Montauk Village Association. They came back and wanted to discuss about the hedges that are in front of the gazebo and in front of the memorial that are on the greens, the Carl Fisher Plaza, and working with the town for removal and redesign on that, as we discussed in the spring. We put that off to the fall right now because it was a little too close to summertime. And we're going to talk offline and get back to a design on that we could have implemented before next season. We will include the Chamber of Commerce in those discussions, as the Chamber frequently uses those grounds for their wonderful events that they have out there safely on the green. It was a little bit quieter for the airport subcommittee. There was no mention of that, but I think we did mention about the upcoming events the town will be having as far as more informational sessions coming out. I think Peter will probably talk about that further. They were talking about the Beach Advisory Committee for Montauk. It goes back to a lot of discussions about beach fires and littering. Of course, it's very highly sensitive right now about littering in Montauk, from garbage cans to code improvements on there and such. So I know I'm going to be meeting with the Beach Advisory group from the town. I'll correlate those conversations then with the subcommittee from Montauk, and we would like to have that in the discussion at the Montauk CAC by December so that we can be ready and prepared for summer 2022. Let's see here. We were upcoming in the Montauk CAC. We're going to have a deeper dive into conversations about long-term parking in downtown Montauk, making it safe, as we've done recently then too. We'll also look forward and plan to discussing that in the next couple of weeks. Peter, thank you very much for your conversation with the group last night in Montauk. I think it went well for them to hear from you as far as the budget and other code responses that you've successfully done. So they appreciate you, and also Kathy for showing up too recently. Land management. I want to let everyone know that the Avalon property on the Circle of the Second House Road has been complete. I've gone by there now, and I think one of the things I want to look at is how we can potentially do some revegetation on there in certain areas to develop a little bit of a buffer, because there is a pitch into the water, but at the same time keep a nice open parkland that it has become. Please drive by if you like. Also move forward on that is that 395 Panago, the demolition of the structures on there has started. They are doing their asbestos abatement, and they're going to be moving on that. Also on the Maloney property, which is in Springs, on Springs Fireplace Road, we have just received our DEC permit for that, and that would be for the bamboo remediation project that we're going to move forward on, removing a stance of bamboo that's there. Lastly, for land management, I know we heard that from one caller. Yes, the Buckskill Meadows Trail is being installed right now. As you heard from the caller, it is going to be a wonderful multi-user trail through the woods, and that will become a very beautiful open park It's just started, so that's why there's no signs there, and the signs will go up there, and we also will get the signs up at the Wainscott Green because those haven't been completed yet either. In recreation, the Turkey Trot is upcoming next month for a board discussion here. John Rooney has discussed the policies for that, and with Dr. Bruce Polsky, epidemiologist, who's been working with the town. The recommendations are to provide a proof of vaccination, such as a CDC card vaccination or the Excelsior Pass, and, or a proof of negative COVID-19 test no more than 48 hours prior to the event. Most people can all sign up online prior to it, and then show that information as they register there for the event. These are the same criteria that are used by the New York Roadrunners and also for the New York City Marathon. So I wanted to see if the board was okay moving forward with the Turkey Trot this year with those policies in place.
I'm good with that, and I can't believe Thanksgiving is next month.
Wow. You're talking about Thanksgiving already. Yeah, I agree, Kathy.
But I'm fine with those guidelines, David. I think that makes a lot of sense, and I appreciate Dr. Polsky. He's always made himself available, and he's weighed in on so many different issues, and I'm grateful for his service.
He is definitely weighed in on Michigan's football team this year also. Yeah, Bruce, all right. Okay, so we'll move forward, but don't forget, I did bring up summer 2022 earlier. You know.
I know. Well, last night you said to the Montauk CAC, we got to start planning in December and January. It's
summer.
So you're bringing up
summer
football,
2022.
David, how's Penn State doing?
I don't want to jinx it, but we have a tough game this weekend, and I'm more thinking about the Yankees tonight.
Yes.
Yeah, well, I think you beat Doc's team the other day. So.
We did. I was quiet on that one.
I beat IU. So.
I want to let everyone know that I'll have a couple of resolutions on for Thursday. Two of them are going to be separate resolutions to accept proposals for the next phase of the second house restoration. This is going to be for some added engineering design from Drew Bennett, and also for architectural historian services of Bob Hefner, just to support and overview the next phase. We have exhausted what was their proposals from last because we have phased it out now. So I'll have those on, and we'll continue moving forward on that project. Also,
thank
you. Also, we're going to have a secret determination resolution. We just got back for the Lions Field bathroom for the septic upgrade of that town bathroom. That's the bathroom that's right next to the Montauk Brewing Company there. Very highly used. And I think it will end up, it shows our policy moving forward, our priority systems to upgrade the town septic systems at these locations. And that should show some positive results into Fort Pond over the coming years. I had a conversation with the groundskeeper, Jason Walter, former senior chief. I think he's senior chief of Coast Guard Station Montauk. He's the groundskeeper at the lighthouse. I call him and we talk about the Lost at Sea Memorial. The Lost at Sea Memorial is actually a town-owned memorial on the property of the Montauk Historical Society there. It is 22 years ago this week. Well, that's crazy, actually. Well, yeah, so 22 years ago this week that it was installed and dedicated, upcoming. We are in charge of the maintenance on there. But I just want to let everyone know that they are aware of it. The town is aware of it, and it's a beautiful statue out there, and dignified of all the individuals that have been lost at sea. I want to thank the village also. The village had their 100-year anniversary. I thank Hugh King. It was, he was a great grand marshal and historian and a font of knowledge. And it was nice participating in all their events of the weekend then too. I thought it was nice from the park for the kids to everything else. And it was a really well done local community event. It was nice to see people participating in that. Lastly, I don't know if you can tell, I'm wearing pink. My tie, my shirt. October is Breast Cancer Awareness Month. For breast cancer awareness, early intervention and screening is extremely important. I think we should remind that. If you have breast cancer, like my mother is dealing with right now or has been dealing with, you never give up. And the reason why I said, oh my gosh, before is I looked down and it's 2 days from when I was diagnosed with cancer. So for all the cancer survivors out there, it's a great club, and for all the people dealing with it, never give up, stay strong, be aware, and pray. Okay? Thank you very much.
Thank you, David.
Thank you, David.
Sharing something so personal.
Yeah.
Sylvia? You have a-
Sure. Very uplifting, David. Thank you. So the Waynescott CAC met. They had concerns about over-clearing on lots in Waynescott. They have been talking to Kevin Cooper, who's been very responsive and has asked that when they see any kind of clearing occurring, please call his office. And, because a lot of folks call after the fact. And so he said, if you do it while it's happening, we can actually take a look at what's going on. There were a lot of suggestions on how to prevent this from continuing, and that so different members were saying, that we should have perhaps inspections before foundations go in, that the lots have not been over cleared, and to also consider in those inspections, if they have over cleared, they have to stop construction right then to be able to have a re-veg plan or some other way to remedy it. It would be along the lines of a plumber or electrical inspection that you have on a house. Also suggestions to withhold a C of O if necessary before, so that they make sure that clearing is not, that the overclearing doesn't continue. They discussed implementing a tree ordinance as other municipalities have. And so we're going to look at, as a committee, our clearing restrictions so that we can make sure they're sufficient on different size properties that we have, and that our code is sufficient in helping with clearing issues. We did talk about the airport.
Can I just jump in there, Sylvia? Because when we had a department heads meeting last week, it also came up in the department heads meeting, because, you drive around town and it's staring you right in the face, where people that are for like new construction, they're clear cutting their yard, the entire parcel, which is heartbreaking. And I know that that I believe it's the department heads have set up a subcommittee to discuss quality of life issues. I know John is on it, Kim and Glennon were all talking about it. And I'm wondering if maybe we could, work with, Kim's department, work with Mark Abramson, and maybe develop some kind of, public service piece, whether, it's education, right? We still have some money left in the public information line in the 2021 budget. Maybe we want to do a postcard mailing, or ask Natural Resources to put on some kind of webinar where we could talk about, like the do's and don'ts. Because I think part of it is there's just a lot of new people that are living in our community that really don't understand the code. And they turn to their landscaper or whatever and say, take them all down. And, they're taking them all down rather than saying, oh, sorry, the town has their, code on the books about that. So I'm just wondering what we can do.
I know that has been an issue, and Mark Abramson in Natural Resources is tasked with approving revegetation plans and whatnot, but perhaps a more direct approach with that information coming directly from the building department as part of a building permit issue, and maybe having an attestation that they have read and understand the rules. And that violations will result in suspension of building permit and stop work order until the issue's resoled. And
that
could take months between preparing a revegetation plan and implementing it. And I agree. I just think it's unconscionable to me that people come in and strip an entire lot to build a house. That's so contrary to all of our efforts for decades to protect, the natural vegetation throughout the town. And that's resulted in what is one of the most beautiful towns anywhere, certainly on Long Island. And, we have to hold the line on that. So I appreciate you bringing that up. I regret I wasn't able to be at the department heads meeting and a couple other meetings last week as I was moving my father into long-term care and cleaning out his house to prepare for that next stage. So I appreciate you all stepping in and taking over some of the duties that I might have been otherwise engaged in.
Oh, well, I'm sorry, Peter, to hear that. But I'll go back to the clearing issue. Kathy, if you want to work with me and talk about some of the issues, some of the things that the Wainscott CAC was discussing, and making sure that there aren't what I called oops moments, like, oh, well, we took down all these trees, so sorry. Now we'll put down little trees as a re-veg plan. We want to avoid even that happening. Right. So if there is something that we can do, and part of education is perhaps instituting a tree ordinance. That helps people talk about it more, because we're going to put it out there in the public view for them to consider a tree ordinance. And particularly with contractors and the amount of building that's going on, I think we really need to work on this. So appreciate all the support, Kathy, from you and the town board. So the airport issue, there were statements that they were very upset about from the East Hampton Community Alliance. I think I have that right. That they feel that that information is misleading, and they were upset that they are putting misleading information out there. One of the two members of the CAC went to Just Plain Fun Day back in September and spoke to members of the Suffolk County Police Emergency Helicopter Team who happened to be there. And one of the EMTs who has a 10 years experience, really wanted to talk about how KHTO is used as an emergency service. And so they took notes, and I'm just going to read some of their notes. Okay, hold on. So they are based in and fly out of West Hampton Airport. There are 2 helicopters are based there, and they're staffed until 11 p.m. at night. Islip has 2 helicopters based there, and they're available 24 hours a day. When directed by the police for 9/11 to go into action, and residents can't call to request them, it is up to the police system in order to direct the helicopters. The medevac helicopters. They will fly directly from one of those base locations to a spot near the emergency itself, a field, a road, etc., and then return to Stony Brook generally. The EMT they spoke with said, in quotes, we meet the injured person pretty much anywhere they are. Mm-hmm. She said the flight to Stony Brook is about 20 minutes from most of the East End, depending on wind. So they're requesting that our consultants reach out and get the facts for paramedics and flight paramedics, and how often they actually use KHTO as a medevac spot. And according to the person they talked to, that person who had been in service for 10 years had never used KHTO for medevac.
Yeah, I think that's a misconception that many people have about the airport, that it's used quite a bit for medevac. As the board members know, we have a number of designated landing sites throughout the town. The head of 3 Mile Harbor, that area is a designated site. 555 in Amagansett, the Overlook, down by the docks, there's an area. And again, it's the most expedient and closest location. Usually when somebody needs to be medevac, there's extreme trauma. They don't want to transport them even by ambulance a short distance if they don't have to.
Right. So anyway, I just wanted to read that into my liaison report, what the members of the CAC who heard it from an EMT and that police helicopter group said. They also talked about Orsted, the wind farm. They would like to have a step-by-step as the Windstar Farm construction is proceeding. And I did reach out to Jen Garvey, and they're putting together an open house probably at the end of November. It will be virtual to answer any questions from the community as they start to consider construction efforts in 2022 and beyond. Planning October 27th. As a member of the Wainscott, well, he was on the call for the Wainscott CAC, and as the chair of the planning board, he knew that they would be interested in Wainscott Commercial Center, also known as the Pit. So the planning board will be considering the draft EIS, which is 1,900 pages long, at their October 27th meeting. If anyone is interested in listening to that meeting, they will be considering the completeness of that draft EIS. A subcommittee is working with Preservation Long Island, and they are hoping to have a speaker from Preservation Long Island to discuss with the Wainscott CAC a move towards possibly creating a historic district. And they're going back through all of the Bob Hefner's survey that he did many years ago of the area and working with Preservation Long Island. And personally, I think it's a great direction for Wainscott folks to be moving. And I'm not sure it's going to happen overnight, but I think that there needs to be a lot of education there as well. And I'm really happy to see that they're taking up, a path forward and to at least consider historic districting. There was a conversation about beach parking on Beach Lane. Obviously, they would like more space, but they think if it was designed better, there might be some more space. They're worried about emergency vehicles not able to get to that end of Beach Lane if there was an emergency there. They did say that there are surf camps, and there seem to be 2 surf camps there that have what they are calling long trucks, which is like a rig with a van attached to it. And they park in the parking spaces, but they stick out way too far. And so they're blocking what could be, maneuvers that could take place within that parking lot. And so they would like the town board to consider when they give permits for these surf camps, that they consider the length of the vehicle that they're actually going to be using, and that they not be longer than the parking space itself. So that was one issue that they wanted to consider. Also, the bike rack needs to be moved to a more conforming location. It seems to be in the way of the handicap parking space. And they think street parking is also an issue because it is blocking. They're not all 4 wheels are off of the pavement, which they should be. So they would like more traffic control officers to go down there and make sure that that is happening, because if everybody gets their vehicle off of the pavement, then there would be ample room for vehicles to pass. We did have a brief discussion on dispensaries as we move towards, that discussion with the whole town board that's coming up. And they are going to form a subcommittee. And just from the brief comments that they made, they would hope that there would not be any residential district that would be included as a dispensary location, and no on-site consumption would be in any of these dispensaries. They would allow they would consider thinking about outdoor farming, and they would then like no smoking in any parks to be posted, because there was a concern that the parks would become in essence a place to consume. So they would like that not to happen with parks and kids and recreation. So
we could implement that no smoking period. You can prohibit it being smoked anywhere where you have no smoking of tobacco. That's
okay.
automatic. So that would be done in conjunction.
Yeah, well, we'd have to then, exactly. So, so that was my report from the Waynescott CAC. Also, I've sent you guys all an email. The Chamber of Commerce in Montauk would like to have Wi-Fi at the gazebo. They need a repeater. Is there a problem with it? Is there a reason we shouldn't do it? They would like to have a go-ahead. I know, John, if you could weigh in on this when you get an opportunity. I have a meeting tomorrow with the business committee, and the chamber is part of that committee, so I would love to have an answer for them sometime tomorrow. I just wanted to remind everybody that on the 12th, we're going to have Eric Shantz, who's going to be at our work session talking about affordable housing and planning for 395 Panago Road, and also 114 for overlays, affordable housing overlays on 114. So just want to remind everybody to tune in on the 12th.
Thank you, Sylvia. Jeff, do you have a liaison report for us?
Jeff, you're muted.
Yes, yes, I do. Somewhat short. I met with the East Hampton Sag Harbor CAC, and they're concerned and eager to spread the word that the East Hampton Food Pantry, the one behind Town Hall, needs volunteers. There apparently there were a lot of theater people who had moved out here temporarily during the COVID outbreak, and apparently the theaters in New York are starting to reopen, and a lot of them are leaving, and many of them were volunteers. They do their preparation on Monday. They do the distribution Tuesday, 6 to noon. They take deliveries on Wednesday, and on Thursday they spend time arranging the bags for the following week. And they've asked anyone who's interested in volunteering to call the number, which is 324-2300. And anyone they speak to is probably going to be able to connect them with work that they can do as a volunteer. And, for me, it's a reminder that even in the midst of, all the affluence that we see, we do still have food insecurity. We have a big part of our population who experience food insecurity. And it's a concern, especially in the midst of the wealth and affluence that we see in the community. So I hope people call and help out. They had a question, Kathy, maybe you know something about this, about the corridor study. There were some complaints or at least comments about the guardrails that were put in. And so, I think the sense was that they were hoping they would be wooden guardrails, but apparently they're not. And I don't know if that it was a major concern, but it was brought up that.
Yeah, I brought that up in my liaison report, Jeff. When we met with the county in August, that was a change order. That was not in the original engineering plans that the town engineer and the planning department reviewed. That's what their county is using. And apparently what they've used over by Town Pond, it's more of a, I don't know if it's like Peter, you may be able, some kind of like coated like wood or it's, maybe it's a corrosive, it's got a corrosive look so that it blends in better. Apparently they're not using those any longer. They can't use them. So that's kind of what we've got right now. So I know there were complaints. People were talking about it on social media, but it
is what it is what you're saying.
Yeah, it is.
Unless we get the county to change it.
Yeah, it reminds me of what happened over in Sag Harbor. They did install the metal guardrails, and then the community made a fuss, and they replaced them with wood, actually.
Yeah, Bridget worked on that, and it apparently was, an uphill battle to get the county to understand the difference in aesthetics out here. It was raised at the meeting with the gentleman in charge of, public works. it would be something we would have to lobby the county and to try to get that changed.
Yeah, it sounds like somewhat of a heavy lift. I know it wasn't easy for Sag Harbor. It took a lot of organization to do it. They were also just interested in a few general topics we discussed at some length: the community preservation 0.5% tax, the Fred Thiel initiative that we as a town board have supported, and we had a little bit of a discussion on that. Actually, they wanted to know more about the airport revisioning process and where we were on our decision-making process. So I gave them a pretty extensive summary of the work that had been done and tried to help folks to go on the website to get to the original documents so that they could look them over. And I'm happy to report that Lena Tabori, who's, as we all know, is pretty active, was one of the participants in the small group breakouts, and she was very complimentary about the way it was handled and the general mood of communication that was what we were able to create in those small group breakouts, and was very, very complimentary about the folks that ran it. That would be Dodson and Flinker and Lisa LaCourie. And I have to say, having participated myself in them and watched a little bit of others, I felt the same way. What she found surprising was that the arrangement of the groups and the timing the time that people were given to speak seemed to diffuse the anger and the tendency to just disagree and attack or respond to what other people said. And she noticed that it wasn't that people reached an agreement, which isn't surprising, but what surprised her was the extent to which people actually spoke politely and listened politely to each other. And she found that very notable. So I was very pleased to hear that, and I passed it along. I was glad to hear from you, Sylvia, on the emergency helicopter issue. I read the same memo, and I feel that that's an important issue to get out to the public. And I can say that as a parent who had the unhappy but ending well experience of having my son involved in a serious car accident, and he was helicoptered out to Stony Brook Hospital, and happily, fortunately, all was well. But a couple other kids were not as well. So it's a serious concern, and I've seen it happen, and I know how it feels when it happens. It's pretty scary, but it's good to know that whatever we do on the airport, it's not going to impede emergency access, and I think that's a message we should get out. I wanted to ask you, Kathy, just a quick question about getting the plans back from on the proposed senior center, whether it would be possible to not just come back with one set of plans, because I think it would help the board. I think it would help me to see more than one set of plans and maybe do it in a couple of steps rather than have the small committee just land on one and say, here it is.
No, we're not there yet. So right now, Jeff, we're going to be interviewing at the end of the month architectural and engineering firms.
Oh, okay.
And so that's the first step. And what this RFP was very different than the RFP we put out in 2017. There were, Jeannie Carrozza can send it to you so you can see and how
I have it.
And how the scoring was done. Community engagement was a big part of that. All of the respondents had to talk about how they were going to engage the community to help inform the schematic design. So we're not there yet.
Okay. Yeah, I have the paperwork on it. It's pretty massive, and I'm going through it. So I appreciate that. And I just wanted to say, following up on David's comment on the village parade, I got to say, we've all seen a million parades in our lives, starting from when we were kids. And I'm not a person easily impressed by parades, but I got to say to the village and to the mayor, this was a rocking parade. I've never seen as much equipment and as interesting equipment. And Hugh King was narrating each of the pieces of antique fire equipment that came by. I've never seen that many in my life. And one of my favorite moments in the parade was Hugh would make them stop in front of the reviewing stand so that he could talk to them about the year it was acquired and what they did. And he stopped one of the larger trucks, and whoever was driving it, as he was explaining, he said, "There's a plaque on the truck. Read the plaque." And he couldn't read it. And the plaque was in honor of Hugh King's father. And he didn't even know that the plaque was there. So, I mean, I got to tell you, I had a great time at that parade. It was a lot of fun. And Hugh was on his game as well as he ever is in front of town boards. And, as I said, I felt like a kid again. I mean, I just couldn't believe the size and amount and excitement. And it came down to the Girl Scouts as well and the brownies. It was really a lot of fun. I was glad to be there. That's really all I have. It's a shorter week for me with my liaison assignments. I think that covers it.
Thank you, Jeff. I just wanted to bring everyone up to date on the most recent COVID numbers, positivity rate that we have for the period between 9/20 and 9/26. For East Hampton, there were 1,268 patients tested at the local site here at Panago Road, right behind the town hall. 1,268 tested. There were 119 positive. That represents a 9% positivity rate. In Montauk, there were 461 patients tested, 49 positive, 11% positivity rate. Those are down by about 3 points from the period before, 9/14 to 9/19. I hope this is a trend that continues. There's still pretty high positivity rate numbers, and I don't know if any of you all know folks that are recently infected, but I do know that there are some people come to my attention, and there are some town employees who've gotten infected as well, not necessarily on the job, but so I think it's worth continuing to be cautious at this point. Again, I'm hoping, we went from 12% the previous testing period to 9% in East Hampton, 14% positive to 11% in Montauk in the most recent period. Again, I hope this trend continues in a downward fashion. I'd like to be able to get back to in-person meetings, as soon as possible. We have expanded testing within the town. We're partnering with Care One Concierge to offer COVID-19 tests in Wainscott. That's a free PCR saliva test. It's as effective but not as intrusive as the nasal swab. And the testing is now offered on Tuesdays, Thursdays, and Saturdays from 10 a.m. to 6 p.m. at the East Hampton Center for Humanity, the former CDCH school on 110 Stephen Hands Path. We may increase the testing depending on the demand. So we now have 3 sites within town. The new partner, Care One, their partnership with their lab has been guaranteeing a 24-hour turnaround once the lab gets that sample. We understand how important it is for tests to be returned rapidly. They may expand and offer rapid tests soon as test supplies allow. Right now, they're very hard to come by due to the increased testing all over the country. There would be an out-of-pocket cost for all on those, and that would be $100 for that rapid test once it becomes available. I have some good news on the front of matter of the town of East Hampton and East Hampton Town Board against the New York State Department of Environmental Conservation and Sand Highway. This revolves around the expansion permit of a pre-existing non-conforming mine in a residential neighborhood off Middle Highway. The DEC permit would have allowed the owners to mine to a depth of 110 feet below the groundwater, creating essentially a 6.5 acre lake. We're concerned right from the very beginning. We believe that this expansion goes beyond what's allowed under town zoning for pre-existing non-conforming use in this location. And even more concerning is the potential for this becoming a pathway to contaminates into our critical drinking water, our sole source aquifer. There are some Suffolk County wells nearby. Suffolk County Water Authority joined us in our efforts to gain a TRO, a temporary restraining order, to prevent this mining to occur while we appeal the decision in court. So this was very good news to get. That came in late yesterday. I have 3 different resolutions that I'm going to be offering on Thursday, and these are the dedication of town-owned properties to individuals. The first is the naming of preserve for Seal Downs at 958 Springs Fireplace Road in Accabonac Harbor. Seal lived in East Hampton for many, many, many years. I think well over, 70s, probably well over 50 years. And she was an artist and an activist, and she was a contemporary and friend of Jackson Pollock and Lee Krasner, James Brooks, and Charlotte Park, among others, in the Springs artist community. She advocated for Accabonac Harbor and was the founder of the Accabonac Protection Committee, which continues to this day and does great works, and very happy to partner with them on a number of water quality projects all around the harbor. And the town had purchased Seal's property at 958 Fireplace Road, which is on the east side of Fireplace Road on the harbor. And it's about 1 1/3 acres. And I'd like to offer a resolution on Thursday to dedicate that property to her and name it after her. Additionally, as we spoke previously, a work session, I'll have a resolution on to dedicate the Amagansett Youth Park in honor of Lee Hayes, a Tuskegee Airman from East Hampton, and who would be 100 years old this June 20th. And we'll work with the family to find an appropriate time to do that dedication. Also, the naming of a preserve for Nancy Kelly, dear friend, tireless advocate for the environment, director of the Nature Conservancy for Long Island, among other organizations she worked with, beginning of the South Fork, group for the South Fork in 1981. Again, somebody who just tirelessly worked to preserve our native habitats and ecosystems and to really, prevent overdevelopment. So that would be for the 5.6 acre former Mahoney property on Accabonac Harbor. Again, that's an area where Nancy lived for many years, and I think would be a very fitting location to dedicate to her. We will also have, let's see.
And Peter, those all came out of the 2 nature preserves came out of recommendations from the Nature Preserve Committee.
That's correct. Let's see what else. We had town property management committee meeting yesterday, and we discussed a number of things. The Springs Library, and I mentioned today when Jeannie was on for bids as to when the roof and chimney work will be rebid. Drew Bennett is working on producing plans for the reconfiguration and renovation of the bathroom there to make that ADA accessible, as well as general access to the building. The rear ADA ramp is in poor repair and needs to be reconfigured, rebuilt. There was interest expressed in designating Duck Creek Farm as a historic register site. It certainly would qualify on a number of counts. The Jonathan Little barn, which was the Gardner barn, was originally built down by the Gardner Milk Cottage back in the end of the Civil War in 1865, and then was later purchased from the Gardner family by Jonathan Little, who had it disassembled and reassembled at Duck Creek. But the Duck Creek farm was the Edwards farm, which dates back to the very earliest days of East Hampton and actually covered almost all of the eastern side of 3 Mile Harbor. And that homestead house, while the exterior has been renovated and secured, the interior has yet to be completely restored, and that's an ongoing discussion as well. Again, those types of projects can be paid for with the CPF funds. There was also quite a bit of discussion with Brooks Park subcommittee. We had joining us Marietta Gavaras again and Janet Jennings, who also introduced us to Michael Devonshire, who's with Jan Herd Portnoy Associates. He's a preservationist, and gave us a brief presentation discussion about having the buildings given a condition assessment and developing a restoration plan. Previously, we had a conditions assessment done by Drew Bennett back in 2015, and all agreed that it was time for an updated conditions assessment. And there'll be some further discussion with Jeannie Carrozza about whether or not this is eligible or required to go through an RFP process to do that, or whether a professional, outside professional would be adequate. There was also a request to, depending on the outcome of the conditions assessment, to request a national register application be put forward for Brooks Park. And there was a little bit of further discussion about the Boys and Girls Harbor pavilion. Once the town adopts the management plan, we'll have a presentation of the recommended pavilion, bathroom, parking configuration from the committee. And I think that pretty well covers my report for today. I believe we have a couple of resolutions to approve, Kathy.
Jeff.
Or Jeff, okay, yeah, Jeff, thank you.
Give me a minute, I have to find it on my phone here. Okay. And the winner is? Okay, resolution 2021-1096 is to establish a leave bank and share time account for an employee in the Justice Court, beginning with pay period number 21, September 26, 2021, and that the leave bank be monitored and accounted for by the town budget office in coordination with the finance department.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye, passed and carried. 2021-1097 is to promote Neji Valeria to the department head and principal accountant position. And that would be at an annual salary of $90,000, 40-hour work week, retroactive to September 27th, 2021.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye, passed and carried. Resolution 1098 is budget modification insurance, and that is moving from health insurance in various lines in various amounts to contingency. Sorry.
Second.
To insurance, not contingency, in the amounts of 110,000, 30,000, and 6,700.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye, passed and carried. 1099 is a budget modification and amendment, and this is to amend 4 resolutions adopted September 23rd to adjust the change to appropriate budget lines.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
And passed and carried. We do have some exec session things to talk about, but I just wanted to state that our next work session on the 12th will include the budget discussion, as I said earlier, but it also will include a presentation of the airport workshop comments that will be presented by Dodson and Flinker and Lisa LaCourie. So we'll have a discussion about that. To Jeff's earlier point, I think the community received those workshops well, and I think I'm very pleased with the way that went. I think there was a lot of engagement. They were conducted in a very civil manner. People were able to express their views and concerns constructively. And we will be reviewing those comments. Public engagement is crucially important on a topic that's as controversial and important to the future of our town as the airport. And additionally, on the 19th, we'll be having a discussion with our outside counsel about the number of different possible avenues the town could take to restrict operations, hours of operations, and further control air traffic. It'll be a whole array of options that we can review and the potential consequences of taking those actions. I attended the Montauk CAC again last night to express to them directly that I do not support any changes to East Hampton Airport that would result in increased traffic and disruption in Montauk at the Montauk Airport. I think it's really important that we not take a problem from one part of town, simply displace it to another. So for me, I'm going to very carefully review all of our options, and I will be looking to see what the potential impacts could be to Montauk with whatever actions we do take. We have a lot more work to do in understanding our different possibilities as to what we can do at the airport. And so we'll begin that discussion on October 19th at the work session with outside counsel. At this point, I'll take a motion to go into executive session.
I move that we go into exec session for CPF purchases to consider personnel, planning department, and for advice of counsel.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye, passed and carried.
What time?
I'm sorry?
What time?
Yeah, I was going to suggest 3:20. Does that work for people? 3:20?
Sure.
Yes, thank you.
What is the time?
3:20.
3:20.
Yeah, and I'll send the link shortly. Stay safe and be well, everyone.